right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the March 14th, 2022 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature if you're remote, and of course raising your hands in the meeting room if you're present physically. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make your comment or ask your question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And because some board members are participating remotely, every vote will be taken by roll call. And please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. I'll begin by calling a roll of the board members. Justin Wood.
Present.
Linda Hassinger.
Here.
Bob Hassinger.
I'm here.
Prabhu Venkatraman.
I'm here.
Dave Robbins is here, and Associate Member Maura McCormack.
Here.
And here with us is staff Christopher McGoldrick
Present.
and Natalia Allward.
Present.
And additional
Present.
meeting participants are here for their respective agenda items. The first item on tonight's agenda is public input. If there's anyone here from the public who wishes to speak to the board on a matter that is not already on the board's agenda, now would be the time to do it. Raise your hand in the room or on Zoom if you're interested. And seeing none, we will proceed with our action item agenda, the first of which is an approval not required plan at 18 Leland and 277 Upton Streets, Johnny's Auto and Light Truck Repair, and Frederick C. Ferry. So you want to, Chris, if you want to sort of explain this, I think this looks pretty straightforward, except for an issue I had with clearly understanding what was proposed.
Yeah, I'll pull up the plans and we can kind of run through them. Just give me 1 second. And I believe the applicant is on as well. Let me just do.
I think I'm on mute.
No, we can hear you.
Now
we can. So this is a A&R application. We're looking at. Sorry, just turn off the view. So it's somewhat of a fairly simple land slot. So the existing lot here. The existing lot here is Johnny's Auto. Parcel A, which is listed as not a building lot, is being split off from that parcel. Both still do have access and frontage. The parcel A, according to the note, if I can get it on the screen, sorry.
See, that's what I was missing, was a note explaining what was being done with Parcel A.
Yeah.
It seems fairly obvious that Parcel A is being transferred from Ferry to Johnny's Auto,
Yeah,
but
I thought there was.
I didn't see any words on the plan to explain that. Normally you would see a notation saying Parcel A is to be held in common with the Johnny's Auto parcel.
Correct. And I believe Nicole Dunphy is on the call, but it's fairly straightforward.
Yes.
I am. I'm here.
Yeah, so we are understanding it correctly that parcel A is being split off from the ferry lot and to be joined with the Johnny's Auto lot?
This, this isn't my project, Chris.
Sorry. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, excuse me, this is Jeff Stefanik from Gurrier and Hellman, the land surveyor.
Yes,
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
yes, we can, thank you.
Yes, that is correct. Mr. Ferry intends to convey parcel A to Johnny's Auto.
Could we point to Johnny's, to the lot it's being joined to?
Yep. So that's
Oh,
right here.
and, it's coming from,
Mr. Ferry, who lives at 18 Leland Street.
yeah, from the house.
Yep,
Right.
Okay.
There's an existing encroachment on this property, the gravel parking area. So this would seem to resolve that as well.
yes, I was guessing that the intent of this is to have Johnny's Auto's parking lot fully on Johnny's Auto's land. So with that said, any other questions from the board, any comments?
I move that we find approval is not required and direct staff to do the appropriate documentation.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none,
We need to update the notation there on the plan for the approval, or is it not needed?
What?
Do we need to update the notation on the plan to say this is the parcel that is going to be added, or is the verbal confirmation good enough?
It's written on there. Well, actually, it doesn't. I don't think, we like to know that, and it makes it easier to understand the plans. But I think our decision on approval depends on whether it's a subdivision. And it's not creating any new subdivision, apparently.
right.
I believe that's correct. And when the land gets deeded over, that'll be clarified at the registry of deeds with the conveyance.
Yes, the deed, right, the deed will transfer the actual ownership. The the recording of the plan basically creates parcel A as a distinct lot. Parcel A will then be deeded over to Johnny's Auto, but that's a separate transaction. But like I said, normally we see that as a notation on the plan, but I don't believe it's essential for the purpose of recording this at the Registry of Deeds.
It may speed up getting past right where we are right now, though.
Well, it's interesting from my perspective. Some towns prefer you not to put that on there because they say, who are you to, who is the land surveyor to define the intent of the parties involved? So some towns like that, some towns don't. But it's not a requirement.
Right, I think that's the key point. It is not essential. As as long as we do informally, we understand what's happening, but formally, the action here is simply splitting parcel A off from the ferry parcel.
The thing is that often these plans come in drawn in such a way that if you don't already know what's there currently, it can be hard to sort things out. And that gives at least a clue to help with the sorting out for some of us. I think there's an alphabet of lines. I have no idea what there. I know there's standards for these, but there ought to be lines that are existing lines and lines that are new lines.
Well, if you look at where it describes the ferry's ownership, it says there that the area excluding parcel A equals X, and that clarifies that parcel A is part of the ferry's property at this time.
Except that I'm looking at this on a not huge computer screen coming down over the internet, and it used to be easier when
I
we
move the
just had-
question.
Yeah, it's true that we often see A&R plans that are somewhat challenging to really understand, but this plan does meet the requirements for recording at the Registry of Deeds. And I think, given everything else we have on our agenda tonight, I really don't want to prolong this discussion.
Yeah, I'll move the question if necessary.
So I will call for a roll call vote on the motion that's on the floor. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The staff will take care of the paperwork on our part, and we can move on.
Thank you all.
Yes.
Good luck.
The next action item is the draft decision on the reopened public hearing as a result of the remand on special permit 2019-2 and site plan approval for Brigade Village. Where we are with this is we've held a public hearing. We've closed the public hearing. We received one piece of information that's now part of the record, and that is the land court remand decision. And the board's next action is to consider the decision that we have to draft from this, basically in response to the remand. And we don't really, we have nothing in front of us yet as a draft decision for this new thing. We are at the stage of deliberation on a decision. And I think the first question I have for the board is, just to recap how we got here, we have a waiver that it was a subject of dispute. That waiver was requested by the applicant. 2 members of the board voted in favor of the waiver. 3 members of the board voted against the waiver. So my first question to the board is anybody on the board interested in reconsidering their prior vote on the waiver? If we want to reconsider it, we can discuss the waiver. If we are comfortable, if all of us are comfortable, voting again the same way we voted last time, then we don't have to discuss the question of whether we should grant the waiver. Our responsibility is to basically redraft the decision, with the denial of the waiver, with what the remand asked for is basically some further explanation of the waiver. So my first question to the board is anybody interested in reconsidering their prior vote?
Well, just in case I might make a mistake, I'm a little slow tonight. I've been in the hospital for several days and just got home in time to turn on the computer. And so I haven't gone very far. Who voted which way?
Justin and I voted in favor of the waiver. Bob, Linda, and Prabhu voted against the waiver. So
I'm not, I still feel the same way I did.
yes, and I would assume let me put it this way, my assumption going into this is that none of us is interested in changing the way we voted. That being the case, the deliberation is going to involve us clarifying the vote. The remand basically suggested that if we are going to maintain our position in the waiver, we need to include language in the decision to, how did I put it in my notes? We need to word the waiver denial so as to distinguish it from the granting in 2003 of a waiver for what the remand decision asserted was essentially a similar situation. And as we go forward with this, whatever we arrive at, I think we will want town council to review whatever we propose as wording before we finalize it, because we'd like to be confident that what we propose as a revised draft decision is going to be responsive to the remand order. And the remand order also mentions some related findings that it found were inconsistent with the waiver denial. So that's sort of where we're at with this. And We have a lot on our agenda tonight, but do we want to at least get a start at listing the reasons for the denial? If anybody cares to, I mean, that's basically where we're at, is we need to explain the denial in terms that ultimately will be responsive to the remand decision. So, and that's really on the three of you who voted against the waiver to articulate the reasons for the vote.
Well, first of all, we didn't articulate it because we never articulate to any degree. And that's because the advice, I've been on the board 31 years, and that advice goes back long before that, that it's not required to do that in this situation. And in fact, I think the judge's decision acknowledged that that is the rule people follow. So in case anybody wonders how come we got to this, the waiver asks for the standards, the of course, to grant a waiver to the subdivision rules for a longer, considerably longer dead end than we allow. The case that was raised in this appeal from 15 years ago or so was different. The extension was substantially less, actually, in my view. And I will note that I don't remember how the vote went. I don't remember how I voted on that earlier one, as a matter of fact. But it's not out of the question that I voted against it then. But I do remember being very. This is a tough one. There were different circumstances there, and a sort of a really unusual set of circumstances. So I thought that the balance came out enough on the right side, or on the side that I voted for. I think the rules are right that we're dealing with, and I don't think that with very largely different boards, 10, 15, 20 years apart, I don't believe that we're bound by past precedent. I think that's not to have been taught. I was unsure enough about the coverage between the 1.5 whatever findings. It's not exactly a one-to-one overlap. I've forgotten. I think it's like, is it safe or something like that? Well, safe is only part of my reason for voting against it in this case. We have that rule for safety, yes, but we also have it as a planning principle. I think that it's one of the rules that determines how the town's road network develops over the course of years and decades. And I think that long dead-end roads are not the best way for the town's roads to develop. So the rule is a compromise to allow a reasonable amount of development under these dead-end circumstances. Which was decided a long time before even I was on the board. Those rules have been in place and enforced largely with just a bit of flexibility for a very long time. I'm sure it goes back at least to the rezoning in the 86, 87 era. I haven't seen the rules from before that. Okay.
All right, just as a follow-up to one point at least, it's true that the remand decision did point out quite clearly that ordinarily we are not required to explain a waiver denial. You know, they by bringing in the 2003 case, the remand decision suggests that we need to distinguish this in some way, and you know, there. I think you've at least given Chris, you've been taking notes. So what we're going to expect is for Chris to begin drafting a new decision, incorporating what the remand order is asking for to the best of your ability. I think if to the extent that we can sort of raise the points that we can raise tonight, such as Bob has, I think that will assist Chris in working on some wording which we can then review with town council and review as a board at our next meeting. So I'm not asking for the board to vote on anything tonight. I would just like to gather enough information so that staff here can give us some words to work on at our next meeting. So Prabhu or Linda, do you have anything you want to add?
I was not on the board when that 2007 or whatever, 2003, whatever that decision was. And I certainly don't have any reason to even bring it up to mind. Looking at our regulations, we have given a little ease to some cul-de-sacs or whatever we want to call them, roads that are one egress in and out. But this one's a fairly long one. And I really didn't feel comfortable with how they were proposing it. And I didn't think that bending into that made any sense. Those rules are in place for a reason. It is safety. It is also, as Bob said, the way the town grows. I have nothing against development, but I think dead ends like that are that long are a problem. They're a problem for fire trucks. We have a very uniquely long fire truck in town, and I still feel very strongly that long dead end is not appropriate in that location.
Yeah, let me just add a point that needs to be taken into consideration. That is, this is a different board. I mean, the five of us on the board now are the exact five who made this decision 3 years ago. But this is a very different board from the board that made this decision back in 2003. On today's board, we have exactly one member who was on that 2003 board. So it was a different board with making judgments that they felt, those board members felt at the time were appropriate. But I think it's fair to point out, as far as the current decision, that is, we are a different board, and we're going to look at things a little differently, and and that's, I think, what we're trying to nail down as best as we can some of why we think differently. But we could say that we just think the 2003 board may have made the wrong decision, or the circumstances were sufficiently different that it doesn't, we are not going to be bound by that. And it's the nature of waivers in general that we're, granting an exception in one case doesn't bind us to make the same or a similar exception in the next case, because other parts of the circumstances can be different.
Right.
Bob.
Dave. Right, exactly. I didn't realize it was all four that are different. But if what do they call it? Stare decisis,
Yeah.
some such thing. If it applied to the way waivers worked, then as soon as we give a waiver, that's everyone in the future is entitled to it, and we've changed the rule because we have to give the next guy the same the same thing, and the next guy the same thing, and it just keeps increasing and increasing. And that's not a. I think that argument should be pointed out in this. That,
Dave, if I may. So
Yes,
I,
Prabhu.
from my point of view, the scope of the work, the conditions haven't changed. We deliberated the decision and the waiver conditions at that point of time, and nothing has changed for me since then. It was 500 feet that was approved. That was water subdivision guidelines. The request was for 1,052 odd feet for the dead end, length of the dead end street. That was not palatable. The condition is still the same, I don't think. And in addition to that, we also, when we were reviewing the bylaws and the subdivision rules, we deliberated this piece. Should we look at a different length for the dead end street and so on? We spent a lot of time thinking about it. It still doesn't, nothing has changed for me. So I, from my point of view, there is nothing material for me to rethink based on no change to the scope or the conditions.
Good enough. Any other comments from the board at this time? If not, I mean, we will have opportunity to continue discussing this once we have some draft language in front of us to worry the details of it. But I think as any other points that we feel need to be raised for Chris to take into account as he gets to work on drafting some wording?
yeah, there's a just in case we need to mention it here so that it could be included. And I wrote a note to Chris a while back about this. How much does the length differ? And some numbers in there. So just be sure that that's available to point out that it is indeed different and longer by a considerable amount.
Yeah, but I think, anything we can identify as a difference between this situation and the almost 20-year-old situation would be helpful in supporting our decision. We don't want, none of us are interested in changing our decision. We just want to support it in a way that will satisfy the remand order. So, having said that, is there anything else on this topic? I know we've got enough other things to talk about tonight. But we will continue this at our next meeting, or whenever staff has been able to. I know you got nothing else to do, right, Chris?
Yeah, I should have enough to dig into some language for the next meeting.
Good.
Hopefully have at least some draft language that we can deliberate on further.
All right. It's almost 7:30.
Can we just make sure that if we're continuing that to the time and date certain, if we just say
Where public hearings closed.
sorry,
Right.
Correct.
Right.
We went through that last time.
We're no longer in the
Yes,
public hearing
sorry.
process. But just for everybody's information, yes, we will plan on putting this on the agenda for our next meeting, which is March 28th, if I'm not mistaken. All right, I was hoping to have enough time before 7:30 to take up the final action item, but seeing as how we've got less than 30 seconds to go till 7:30, probably best if we
How about if we approve the minutes? Previous meeting. So moved.
Second.
with one comment on the February 7th minutes. Where did I put that? I know I wrote it down somewhere.
My
Yes.
motion includes Dave's comment,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yes.
On the February 7th minutes under the mill redevelopment discussion item, the minutes indicated that the plan was to present at the Springtown meeting, but in fact, by the time we were done with that discussion, we had decided that Fall Town meeting was the appropriate target. So that's the only thing I saw in the minutes that I would change. If there's nothing else, there is a motion on the floor to approve the minutes with modifications suggested. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Justin?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The minutes of February 7th are approved as amended. And now it is just past 7:30. So we have before us a public hearing scheduled for a request for special permit and site plan approval of Afonso Village 2 at 100 Westboro Road. We have a request from the applicant. Should we open the public hearing given that there's a request to withdraw?
So no, actually, because the request was submitted prior to opening the hearing, it's not even debatable. It's automatically granted, is my understanding. So, but we left it on the agenda in case anyone wanted to discuss. Obviously,
Yes.
Should we?
He said without prejudice.
Without
I
prejudice.
think that does require a vote.
Even if we didn't open the public hearing, though?
I wouldn't bet otherwise.
Let's do boot and suspenders. I move that we grant the applicant's written request to withdraw without prejudice.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood?
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger?
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger?
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman?
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously, and we can move on. We will see that project again if and when the applicant brings it to us. We have next a new public hearing, request for a special permit and site plan approval at 29 Hawthorne Street. So we'll need to read the legal notice for that one.
Yes. Pursuant to sections 1.5.7 and 1.3.3 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 14th, 2022, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider an application for a special permit and site plan approval request for a light manufacturing company recycling sports equipment into furniture on a property located at 29 Hawthorne Street, shown as Grafton Assessor's Map 35, Lot 37. Said property is located in a village mixed use VMU-WS zoning district. The applicant is Donna J. Mans, and the owners are David Samara and Sherry-Ann Kotowski and Sandra Samara. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-mass.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. This will be a hybrid meeting conducted in person and by remote participation.
Thank you. So welcome. If you would like, you can introduce yourselves and tell us what you're proposing to do. And if you can bring the plan up on the screen, Chris.
Yep. So my name is Donna Manus. I'm trying to purchase the building at 29 Hawthorne. This is John Grenier. He is my engineer.
I'm Sandra Samara. I currently own the building with my siblings.
So we prepared a plan demonstrating that they're not making, first of all, the property's on the corner of Hawthorne Street. It's odd that Hawthorne Street takes up both frontages on both corners.
It's on the corner of Hawthorne and Hawthorne.
That's right. So it's just under a half an acre lot. It has an existing commercial building located on it. What Ms. Manus is looking to do is to move their company, which is called Ski Chair, from their location in Millbury to this location. It's not an intensive use. What they do is repurpose old skis, snowboards. They'll turn them into, Adirondack chairs. It's really not an intensive use. I think the tools that they use are, chop saws,
Skill
saws, and they have how many total people?
So it, typically there's just 2 or 3, but during the seasonal, when they get very busy, it could be like 7 people, 8 people, but they're part-timers because when the holidays come, this company really sells a lot of product.
So the purpose of our application is to demonstrate that they have adequate parking for the use. What we are showing within the existing pavement, so we're not increasing pavement, we're keeping everything really as is. Over time, they might make some improvements to the building, basically more for aesthetics, but they're not looking to expand. They're trying to use the existing facility as is. So we demonstrate we have adequate parking. We are required to have a total of 9 spaces, and we're providing 11. And we also have handicap accessibility. We have handicap. So really the only work that would be done to the site would be restriping some parking spaces in what's now a vacant paved lot. So it's kind of I don't really think a large, in the scope of things, really not a big project. There was some question whether it would fall under the industrial 1 warehouse use or an industrial 2. And the one item that we would hang our hats on, if you look at what the types of uses are in industrial 1, they're much more intensive. We're looking for, meat packing facilities, paper or pulp mills, petroleum refining, sand and gravel pits, sawmills, tanneries. I don't think we come close to meeting the intensity of any of those types of uses. So we're confident that we do meet the classification as an industrial 2 use, which we're looking for, just site plan approval and special permit.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this strikes me as being just, it's really essentially nothing more than a change in use. Whatever the old commercial use, this is a different use, but it's in the same building footprint, the same pavement. As you pointed out, there's no exterior changes, no exterior site changes. That you would refresh the pavement markings. You could eventually refresh the building, but that doesn't require approval from this board.
Correct.
No. All right. Not on yet?
So, anything else?
No.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Sure. So I will say on the application package, I noticed that the mention of like residents being able to drop off, used equipment as well. That is probably past its prime, but still good for this use, and I like that. That's one thing that's not really needed for us to decide with our decision on, but I wanted to say I like that.
Yes. Yeah. So what happens is, people actually, where they're located now in my other facility, which is, I actually have a different company as well, but over in Millbury, which is right down the street from here, people come all the time and they drop off all their used sports equipment. And some of them drop it off and say, hey, can you turn this into a bench, or can you turn it into a wine rack or something? So they actually will make something for them. But at least it's a place where they can drop off their old sports equipment, and then they recycle it somehow. They're very mindful, and they're very creative in trying to come up with different ideas to sell different products.
Yeah. And just to ask as well on a different topic to that is there any sort of airborne contaminants that might go outside this building from the work that would go on in there? Like, I'm thinking if there's any fiberglass involved in any of these pieces, or any laminate things that might exit the building itself. Like, I
mean, while they're fabricating,
yes.
What they do is, they actually retrofit like a plastic kit or a wood kit. And so when they do, they might cut the ski, but there's nothing, the building is a pretty good sized
Yeah.
building. This is all done on the inside of the building. They have vents that vent out if there's any type of, just suction from the dust that creates.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do anything to the environment,
Okay.
that I'm aware of
Yeah.
anyway. The scraps though, there would have to be a dumpster there because they do have scraps that unfortunately they can only recycle so much.
Of course.
So
There
then
is
they would,
currently a dumpster.
Yep.
There's always been a dumpster on the property.
yes, so the plan is they would, recycle whatever little scraps are, they put that in the dumpster. The only thing that, okay, sorry, yes.
You can keep going. I'm not gonna
Sorry,
stop you.
I could talk forever, and I know you've got
Yeah.
a lot behind me, so I won't take up too much of your time, so, yes.
And my kind of final question is just to get an idea for the neighborhood that people that would live there right now on noise levels. Like, is what has been in that building the last like 5-10 years? Construction.
Construction. My father had a construction building
Okay.
business out of it, so most of the neighbors are all familiar with it. A lot of them would come down and bring in stuff to fix and whatnot. So, but a lot of wood product. He made a lot of furniture too.
It sounds almost exactly, or
It
if not,
is.
this would be less noisy.
Possibly. It's pretty much the same thing, only
yeah.
different.
That's it for me then.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Bob, Linda, Prabhu? Did I see your
had
hand up, Prabhu?
one or two questions, if I may.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Prabhu.
So,
Yes.
Justin asked one of the questions which I was looking for. What is the existing facility? What is it being used for? Did you say it's used for construction material? What is being done right now?
Construction. Samara Contracting was based out of that.
Okay. And so just building on that, first of all, welcome to Grafton. Bring in any business, all for it. So fantastic. The question I wanted to know was, do you anticipate trucker trailers coming into the facility? Would that road have the ability to take that in, if at all?
So, tractor, well, there are overhead doors and there is one.
There's a garage bin,
Yeah, there's a load, there is a
a
loading
dock.
area, it's like
type of
it's
thing. It's small.
it's small, but it's enough to bring in, they do get pallets, I'm sorry, they do get pallets of, this recycled stuff from all these different companies. So they do have trucks that come in, but there is plenty of space where they would be able to come in and turn around.
But it's not like a tractor trailer though.
box
It would be more of
truck.
a box truck.
Yeah,
So smaller. They're not
Which
going
would
to have.
fit right in the parking lot. They can back right up to the door and it fits right in the parking lot.
yeah.
Okay. And is it fair to assume that that would be similar to what is being done right now with the existing commercial facility there?
Similar to what it's being done
Yeah,
right now.
Yeah.
for deliveries or.
He got all sorts of deliveries. It hasn't been used. My father passed 4 years ago.
Yep.
So it hasn't been
My
used
condolences.
in that time. So he'd be really excited to see Donna do something with it. But he had all sorts of deliveries there. Probably much bigger
Okay.
ones too, because he would be building on a much larger scale.
I'm good. Thanks, Dave.
Previous to that, it was a commissary.
Anything else from the board? Anybody from the public wish to ask questions? Yes, I have someone in the room. If you could come up to kick them off the table or to stand at the mic at the podium there.
Hello, Malcolm Reed, 6 Hawthorne Street. I've seen several, I've lived there for close to 33 years now, and I've seen a few businesses come in and out of there. We've never had any real difficulty with any of them. Just a few questions, please. Can you say a bit about the kinds of machinery you're going to use there? And just give us some idea of what kind of noise we should expect. That end of Hawthorne Street is, I won't go into details, you probably all know it, but it's kind of funny anyway down at that end of Hawthorne Street with some of the buildings there. But could you just say a bit about the machinery you'll use?
From a noise standpoint, I
Yeah.
don't think that you will hear anything. So the building the building that I own now, Ski Chair is downstairs, and then I have my manufacturing company upstairs, and even Modern Dental, who is next to them, you're inside that building, you would hear, but on the outside, 50, 100 feet away, I don't think that you would be hearing anything.
Okay.
It's not like they're running 50 machines at one time, right? They've got 2 or 3 people coming in, and one person might have to take the skill saw and cut the ski in half. So you're gonna hear a skill saw. It's not like 10 skill saws, they got one. Then they have a sander. So what happens is when they make the snow ski chairs, they actually have to sand the sides of the snow skis so they don't cut an individual when they go to sit and enjoy their ski chair. And the sander, they only have one of those. They have a wood, and actually there's another, do I have the other piece? Nope. There was was one other piece of equipment. They have 4 pieces of equipment. That's all they have in there. So I would say the skill saw, the tuner, and they had a drill press. Sorry, because they have to do the drill press to get the
Okay.
screws into the skis.
Okay, so this would be sort of a minimally sized machining shop, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What are the hours of operation?
Ken gets
Roughly.
there. Yeah, Ken gets there sometimes 9 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes he has to be there till 9 o'clock at night. It's very, very sporadic. It's not like they get there at 7 and leave at 5.
5 days, 7 days? Would you say?
5 days. On the weekends, though, if it is the holiday time, they definitely are there a lot.
And will you operate year round?
They operate year round.
Okay.
Yes, but obviously when it's not seasonal, Ken is there maybe with 1 or 2 part-time people, and they work 40 hours a week, but their 40 hours can shift because it's not like an office job where they have to be there at 8. They have flexibility, so get there at 9. Some will leave at 5. Some might stay till 7 or 8.
Okay, all right. And how often should we expect that box truck?
So I have to be honest, that's a great question, and I really truly don't have the answer to that, because what happens is inside of the building, they have a lot of product already, and so the product will be stored inside, and the box truck comes whenever they say, hey, we're low on product, or they call the company and they say, hey, we have 10,000 skis coming to you. So what happens is the truck will show up and they will dump the pallets, and that's when he may have 8 people there. They don't want those pallets sitting outside. Number 1, it's an eyesore. Number 2, it's not good for the product. It should not be in the rain. So they will take it and bring it inside.
Sure.
So, and I truly don't have an answer for that.
So it's,
Okay.
but
It's not every day.
or
Right.
every week even.
UPS, I know that where we are now, UPS comes and picks up product from them. It's either they're dealing strictly with UPS for pickups. But for like a big box truck or a tractor trailer truck to come in, a couple times a year maybe. It just depends
Sure.
on how busy their business gets.
And you use the word eyesore. I just hope you'll be careful not to add to the eyesore that is already at the end of Hawthorne Street.
Yes, well, my vision is to make it look nicer.
That's great.
I really want some nice planters. I want it to look nicer, and actually,
All right.
I wanted to make it look nicer. That's my intent.
I have no objections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public here in the room or on Zoom?
There was a hand raised on Zoom. I have to stop the share to deal with them. Sherry Samara Kotoski. Would you like me to recognize them?
Yes.
Hi, this is Sherry Kachowski, Sherry Samara Kachowski. I just wanted to make reference to the trucks. The loading area is actually in the front of the building where it's on more the commercial side. It's not where the houses are. So that is a little bit less intrusive than the other side. And again, my father's been doing construction in this area since I was a little kid, and I'm a million years old now. He had another building right around the corner from there at one point. So, and the machines that she's referring to, my father's been using that type of equipment the whole time. So I think it's a good fit. and he would only want to improve the area. So I'm glad that we were able to find somebody who we think could really help out with that.
Excellent. Thank you.
The one thing that you said that was wrong was that she's a million years old. We went to school together. So I don't think that's true.
Okay, outstanding. Thank you. Any other comments? Any other hands raised on Zoom? I don't see any. If not, then it might be, if the board has no further questions or comments, it might be in order to close the public hearing and direct staff to draft a decision.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The hearing is closed. Staff will begin drafting a decision. I would expect us to have that decision ready for the board to deliberate and vote upon at the board's next meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is a public hearing on a new request, request for modification of special permit and site plan approval at 1 Grafton Common. We will begin with the reading of the legal notice.
Pursuant of sections 1.5.7 and 1.3.3 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, March 14th, 2022, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider an application for a modification of special permit and site plan approval request for permanent outdoor patio seating on property located at 1 Grafton Common, shown as Grafton Assessor's Map 74, Lot 72. Said property is located in a neighborhood business NB zoning district. The applicant is Sean Pageant, Grafton Townhouse Tavern LLC, and the owner is the Town of Grafton. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton/mass.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. This will be a hybrid meeting conducted in person and by remote participation.
Welcome.
Thank you.
First order of business here, I think, would be the applicant has an opportunity to introduce themselves and explain the project.
Sure. Sean Paget, 57 Old Upton Road, and Brooke, 23 North Street.
Forgot where you live, Brooke?
Yes, for a minute there. I think most of you were on the board a couple years ago when we got the approval for the tavern in the lower level of 1 Grafton Common. We were open for about a year. COVID closed us down for about a year, and we've been open since May of last year, so almost open a year again. During all of that, we started to do some outdoor seating in one of the grassy areas next to the rear walkway that goes into the main entrance, right next to the elevator. And at some point along the way, we, which I don't have specific dates. We can find them if you need them, but we came and got approval for a patio in that grassy area and a new entrance where one of the doors was. Where one of the windows was. That was granted, use of that area was granted through the emergency provision of the COVID-19 state allowable use. We've used it on and off as weather permits. Since the construction, we haven't had any issues at all. We haven't, most people have liked it quite a bit. We've included a couple letters from other tenants in the building who use the space, and not only just for their own use when the tavern's closed, but also they have customers who like to frequent, as well. So everyone in the building has supported the idea of moving this to a permanent use. We thought that we had to go before the Board of Selectmen to get approval to amend our liquor license to allow that to change from a temporary emergency use to a permanent use. And Ray pointed out during that meeting that it's possible. We honestly, we don't really know, but we think that that it's possible that because it was a special permit, that we actually have to ask for a minor modification of the special permit to increase the, increase the envelope as to where liquor can be served and where business can be done. So we've come before you to just describe what's there. We're not asking to do anything different than what we've been doing for the last year or so, but we're asking to move it from a emergency COVID use to a permanent use.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the outdoor patio use there you're currently using the outdoor patio under the basically the temporary approval for COVID outdoor dining.
Correct.
And so what you're now looking for would be sort of a permanent designation of that as an outdoor area as part of the tavern.
Correct.
And I will note that the board, in at least a couple of other fairly recent cases, has included outdoor dining areas in special permits. I'm thinking specifically of Dunkin' Donuts, where the approval we gave for Dunkin' Donuts several years ago included a few tables for outdoor dining. The approval we gave to Reunion included a table or two for outdoor dining. So that seems to be the situation we're now looking at, and that's sort of separate from the whole use of it in terms of liquor particularly is not so much under this board's purview as it is. Yeah, but I think if anything, what that at the select board meeting, what Ray brought up was the notion that your use of the outdoor area as part of the tavern was pursuant to the temporary approval given for COVID outdoor dining, and
we never contemplated that during the original special permit.
Right.
We didn't have. Well, we weren't forced to go out there.
Right. There was
no COVID.
There was that's sort of an interesting observation. One of the things that COVID has done is it sort of enhanced the whole idea of outdoor dining, brought it to the public's consciousness in the way that we never used to think of it. It used to be relatively rare. And granted that in other parts of the world, outdoor sidewalk cafes are very common, but not here. So yeah, just to keep from being too long-winded about it. Yes, as you point out, when the special permit you first got for the tavern did not include that patio area, right. And so the request before this board now is to include the patio area within the terms of the special permit and site plan approval.
And one of the things I point out is that there are certain requirements, not from you, but from the ABCC, as to how you can enter and access, and
yes,
so we're of course going to comply with all of that.
Yes, it's like I said, how you manage that area for dining and liquor is sort of independent of this board's approval to incorporate that area into the site plan approval and special permit.
And just as a brief point of order, Sean and Brooke, I had someone from outside this meeting message me saying that they're having trouble hearing you. So
sorry.
Just wanted to call that out.
I did have a red eye last night, and I haven't slept yet today, so I apologize for that.
That's all right.
Could you repeat that?
On what we're talking about, the neighborhood, we're not really, there's only one, if you look at the whole, outside neighborhood, we're surrounded by businesses. Except for one corner, far in the corner, it's an apartment building. So there's not really any residential noise disturbance. And people have been out there, as Sean said, for the last year. We've never had a complaint about it. But even if it was a permanent thing, there's really nobody. It's a church, another business, another business, another business. So way over here is an apartment building. We've complained about them, actually.
But actually, one other thing that, to Dave's point, is that as we've learned from doing things outside, the rules have focus down a little bit in terms of what you can do, outdoor entertainment, what hours you can do it, and that sort of thing. So I think the town in general has learned a lot about how to do outdoor seating and outdoor entertainment over the last year or so.
Yes, and as a slight tangent to the discussion on the general topic of outdoor dining, there have been a number of other questions raised and issues that we're looking at. Chris is looking at sort of some extensions to our some way to deal more broadly with the topic of outdoor dining, and that would be more in the context of following up on what we did for 2 years during COVID, which is the use of parking lots for outdoor dining. So that still remains very much a temporary thing. That's it's only good for I forget what I think they were proposing to change the expiration date on that recently, but I don't know if that's happened yet.
I think they went to 23. Yeah. I think that's what the governor said. And you know the property, so you know that's I mean, we don't fall into that.
Right. That's why I want to make the distinction clear on that questions about regulating outdoor dining in parking lots
totally different
is a somewhat different topic than what we're looking at tonight.
Right. Yes. Yeah, we're not contemplating any difference in occupancy. There's no impact on parking, so it's really just sort of looking back at that special permit and saying, can we include this? And I can't remember, say 800 square feet or so of now brick patio, incorporate that into the special permit, I guess.
Yep. Okay. Any questions from the board?
Yeah. Oh, I see Bob's hand. He can go first.
I've been thinking about this, actually all along. How are we gonna, as each of these cases has come along, how are we gonna deal with it? I just got a chance to see the selectmen's meeting with Sean, and there are complications there. We have complications. This is not. If you're going to follow the rules, which we do, it's a little tricky. This is a case where if I'm not mistaken, there is a special a waiver of parking requirement. The building doesn't have anything like its parking, the parking that would be called for. And we looked a lot at that back at the time that the building was being approved. And we thought about it, certainly when the tavern came along. So far, our permitting of the outdoor part for the tavern, I think, would have included the same language as we've used in the others about not increasing the number of seats, because the amount of parking that's required is based on the number of seats. And that was okay because the indoors was closed. So there wasn't going to be a problem with that at that time. But now I'm afraid we somehow should acknowledge that we're revisiting and not just say something like it's okay, but we need to think about how what we've been doing so far plays out in that special case that this building and this business have. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's okay. I made the point that if the parking wasn't adequate, people wouldn't come, and it was going to be all right. And I haven't noticed any major parking problem, other than when the dance studio or the Apple Tree Arts is letting out, and that's a whole separate and bigger deal. But I think we have to cover that base a little bit. And then also we're talking about potentially bringing forward legislation to cover or address some of this. And so something we do now needs to be compatible with what happens with that legislation. Maybe I don't know whether it's allowed, maybe a temporary or short-term permit to cover the time until there's been a chance to modify the bylaws to bring in some more clarity.
If I just sort of as a reminder, this is more. I mean, the point Bob raises about parking is it's a good point to keep in mind. That when the board renders a decision on this, basically what this proposal does by adding some, proposing to add some permanent outdoor seating rather than temporary.
That is correct, but not an increase in occupancy.
Right, so that's the point that we want to make sure we're clear on, that we address that in the decision, is that we, the fact that we're adding some seating, suggests that that could be an increase in occupancy. So we want to make that clear. Number one, what the new proposed occupancy is, how that compares with the old, and if we conclude that there's a difference. I know you state that you're not proposing any change in occupancy, but should there be, well, regardless, we'll want to make sure that we deal with parking basically in a way that's consistent with the way we dealt with parking when we issued the original permit.
Yeah, no.
Because yes, I remember very well, as Bob does, that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the parking problem.
It was the biggest issue
in that area. So
and there's been an increase in parking since that time, right? Because the library has opened up, and,
yes,
and every parking spot up there is open to every business. So it's hard to put a number. And I wasn't at that meeting, but. And I don't know what it says in the special permit, if it says a designated number of parking spots, because I don't think you could.
Yeah, right.
Right. That's right, so it's wide open to the world, and not only that, we've added all that parking the town has in the library, so for that common area, which all the parking is common to everyone, it's just increased more.
Yeah, that was basically, the way the decision turned out 4 or so years ago was, we recognized that there was no parking dedicated to the tavern, and we looked at the available parking in the area, and I think if I remember correctly, we decided that there was sufficient parking within 300 feet of the tavern entrance.
That was exactly how it turned out.
And I think that that parameter probably doesn't change, but we just want to make sure that, my point is to make sure that what we said about parking then is still applicable now, or we say something that maybe is more appropriate now. But we'll want to deal with parking the same way we did before.
I do think, and I guess if we sat down and thought about it, we could probably find another location that might have a similar situation. That property's fairly unique in that regard.
Yes.
But there were a couple of things that came up. One, and Bob spent a lot of time thinking and talking through it, and he said a couple of things. One is that somehow people go to church, somehow we have events on the common, somehow we have parades and all that sort of thing, and we find parking. There haven't been significant issues around that, and if it turns out that people can't park, they're just not going to go. So it's going to be a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy there, and that's exactly, it's turned out to be right. And our point of view at that time was, and one of the reasons why we came here with that project is because parking during the day is difficult, but parking at night not so much, because that business is closed when most of the others are open, and vice versa, and it's played out largely like we all hoped it would.
Yeah. So basically, experience has proven out that we seem to have taken the right approach 4 years ago, and. This proposed change is not likely to impact that in any way.
I don't think so.
I see Bob's hand, but just quick question for you, Sean or Brooke. On the parking front, I drive by the tavern 2, 3, 4 times a week, like Friday, Saturday, and stuff. But my travel time is usually between like 5 and 7, and the traffic on Boulevard there is actually usually pretty heavy and hectic sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Is around then usually when your customers would start arriving, or is it closer to like 8, 9 o'clock at night?
Yeah, it's much more like what you just described. It's we open generally at 4:30 to start preparing the place, and that's frankly when we get the cross traffic from the other tenants in the building, where parents will drop off a kid at the at a dance studio or at music and come down and have a glass of wine or a pretzel or something. But our business really, our business doesn't really start until everything else is closed.
That's what I was suspecting. I just figured I'd ask to be sure.
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
But I'll let Bob continue then.
Bob's hand is raised. Go, Bob.
So I remember all the conversation, of course, about the special circumstances at the Common and the need to try to bring some sense out of it. I'm not sure that Chris would have been in on any of that. I think that may have been before him.
Yes, that's before Chris.
We did talk that this is something we need to try to do. It's a different kind of parking situation. That's our downtown, basically, with parking for everybody is in front of everybody.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing. So I renew the thought that we ought to try to get that under better control if we could, especially now that we're thinking a little bit about the subject. But the other thing was that I think just technically we granted a waiver based on what was proposed then, and we want to be sure that in effect we're granting a new waiver because it's a new circumstance upon which it's based. So we want to be sure that we're making the proper determination and waiver.
Yep, I see Linda's hand up.
Just one really quick thing, completely different to the Pagets. One thing that would help their application a little bit, they refer to having the support of the other businesses and all. Having just even a note or something in support of you would be a really good idea. Having that actually written and having that submitted as, there's no conflict and we get along great with this.
We actually did submit a note from. Sorry.
Yeah, I saw a couple of those in the application.
Hold on.
I'll just answer.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
We did submit, or I'd say we submitted. I received emails from Apple Tree Arts and from Beats Dance Studios that.
Yes,
that they were in support, and I think
they are in our application packet. Yes.
Yeah, and Emily also submitted something directly to you for
Quite
fetching.
So that's good. That's what I was looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the board?
Yes. So a few things. First off, it was last week that the select board hosted a outdoor dining kind of workshop, which did include Bob Berger, our zoning enforcement officer. One concern he raised that was in regards primarily relating to parking for all the businesses, but specifically around counting the occupancy of establishments. He does not want to be, as he worded it, having to count each person that's outside and then count everyone that's inside and go, okay, well, you're 2 people over, or things like that. So like his ideal in that meeting was to suggest something like not have a physical seat in the building for every seat you're able to sit outside. Those kind of things. I don't know that I'm ready to say that that's the solution we need to have, but that's what I want to figure out for the actual ordinance we're doing. That's why I'll say I kind of like Bob's idea of if we can do a temporary or limited time thing, it might make more sense until we have a better sense of how we want to approach this in our bylaws.
I guess the only thing I'd ask for that is, the process of doing this isn't insignificant because we had to go to the Board of Selectmen for the ABCC, which involved sending out 100 letters and paying for application fees and all that sort of thing. And now we're doing the same here, so I get it, but if we had to do that's a couple $1,000s. If we had to do it like every year, that'd be pretty painful for the size of the business that we have. So I guess I'd prefer if there were a way to say, hey, look, if an issue or if we come up with a bylaw that is more restrictive than what you guys have been given, then we'll revisit it. Or if something along those lines, rather than saying, okay, you have to come every year or every 2 years and spend $2,000 in a couple of weeks doing it.
And I'd only say, I appreciate Bob's problem, but I think we are different than what the problem that you guys are going to have, because I think what he's trying to deal with is a lot of the parking lot outdoor seating, which is going to come up a few. We're more like the Grafton Inn that has a space that already has outdoor seating, or the Grafton Grill that has a space that already has outdoor seating. We have a space already. It's not like we're going to be taking any additional space from parking, which I think is where this board is going to have their issues with the rest of it. If we came to you, we're coming to you independently of those, I think it should be looked at independently of those other people who are trying to take parking, where you're going to a semi, they're not going to ask for a permanent because it's a parking lot. My guess is they're going to take it in the summer and then get rid of it in the winter. Ours is, as we said, it's there all the time, and it doesn't affect any other parking for the business. So I think it's a little different than what Bob's concerned about and what the bylaws are going to have to deal with. But
and just one other thing, not to my knowledge, is there a requirement that says based on a certain occupancy, you can have a fraction of that in seats versus standing versus bar space versus there might be. I don't know.
That's the part I wasn't sure yet.
I don't know how.
So
Chris
just to clarify, and taking a little bit of a step back, I think so for this application, and touching on the meeting with the select board. So, as we discussed at that meeting, there's going to be some businesses that have an easy time getting through these process and making the outdoor dining that they've used under the temporary COVID measures. There's going to be other businesses that I think may have some challenges. The overall takeaway that I got from meeting with the select board was that they were encouraging us to provide more flexibility for businesses in order to bring these temporary measures to a permanent situation, and at least review the bylaws to see how we can provide some flexibility to bring that to the table rather than being outright denied if the temporary measures lapse. So that is something that we are going to be looking at as the bylaw changes. Again, it's not going to be focused. Those bylaws will not be focused at any specific business. They can't be. It has to be written and then applied across all of the businesses. So certainly I think we will be looking at making what restrictions are in place less restrictive. The unique case here and why we're able to proceed in this application is not a temporary. This is for a permanent modification, and the only reason we're able to proceed in this case currently is because of the unique situation of this business that has the existing outdoor space, which doesn't require the use of any parking. So the existing bylaws as they are and as we're proceeding with this application do allow for the board to review this. Other businesses will have some challenges, and we're going to be looking at how do we make those provisions. But in this case, it's much more clear moving forward in terms of the seating and how that relates to parking. Typically, the parking is allocated per table, and it's typically a ratio of however many seats you have in your business or restaurant, and that's how many the minimum parking spaces need to be provided. I think some of the discussion on that is that becomes tricky in enforcement. So while we're looking at how we allocate parking to businesses, it may be a good time to look at that ratio or even just the methodology of how we're allocating parking to businesses. And so that was kind of the discussion, and that's certainly one of the things that we'll be looking at for potentially providing flexibility to businesses. But again, in this case, the applicant is proposing no new occupancy. What it may be beneficial to do, and I have to go back through the narrative and see if that was provided, but we could just talk about the seating count indoor existing and the number of seats outdoors. Again, another unique case here is that the parking for this location has already been waived under the underlying special permit, but as was noted from the board, that may be something that we want to review in a narrative on the outdoor seating and how that affects it in terms of count, but maybe.
Yeah, so this again is, building on the existing special permit and just expanding the area, that's covered by it. So with reference, what, as we draft a decision here, Chris wasn't around when we did that previous permit. That was under a previous town planner, and some, but not all of us on the board were on the board at the time. But we'll review the existing permit decision, in particular the language, what we spelled out there in terms of parking, how we arrived at the approval. And again, we've kind of talked about how that worked out. Chris will look at some of the details of that, and we'll look at how this proposal fits in with what we already approved. I suspect it will turn out that the way we approved it, and particularly with respect to parking, then will apply to this expansion. But you'll work the details on that, review the old permit, and the record that led up to it to whatever extent is necessary, and we'll draft a decision for this that's based upon that, taking into account everything we did back then, particularly in terms of parking. And again, just as a reminder, this is quite different from questions of temporary outdoor seating occupying a parking lot, because that brings in a whole other raft of questions about the relationship between seating and parking, which we've dealt with frequently over the last 2 years. But fortunately for this application, those kind of considerations don't come into it. But there, as this discussion has brought out, there are a number of details that we'll have to pay attention to as we prepare a decision on this one.
So, yeah, I do have
anything else, Justin?
Yes, I do have a few more comments and questions.
You got a list of 2,000 questions there. I can see it.
I'm not going to ask everything on my list. Go ahead, Bob.
Could I?
Yes,
before
Bob.
more things go by, I was not thinking in terms of an ongoing process of short-term special permits. I was thinking about everything is going to be in turmoil in terms of the laws, both the state and what we're talking about developing over the next several months. And I don't want us to issue a permanent decision on this and then have a problem with how it interacts with what it comes up a little later down the way when we have possibly some legislation.
I think this is more like the Grafton Inn.
Okay, it's everyone is different. It's more like this, more like that. It's awfully hard to think about it. So
It is more like that.
I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid doing something permanent while we're looking at changing the rules.
I think a point to be taken from that is that as this decision is drafted, we want to anticipate potential conflicts with other changes related to outdoor training. Sort of, to the best that we because since we don't really know what's coming down the pike, but if we can anticipate some areas that future changes may impact on this, we want to try to take that into account.
And I think that, I guess maybe I have a very simple way of looking at this, but it's, we're not affecting parking because we don't have any, right? So we're not taking anything away from the supply of parking. And what we're really asking in this particular case is to redefine the the area outside of parking spaces that was originally approved for the special permit.
And if I'm just gonna piggyback from what Chris said, you're trying to make it easier. I think what we're kind of saying is just treat us the way you are right now, which apparently is not easier. So I think we meet with the rules as they currently are, not these new rules that they're gonna try to be flexible to allow people to get more. We think, you know, as I said, the Grafton Inn or Post Office Pub or all these other places that have outdoor seating, you approve those under some sort of rules.
Yes.
So just put us under the same rules, the harder rules, and I think we meet.
Yeah. However,
To be pedantic about it, some of those were never formally approved by the
Right,
town
right.
because at the time they were just allowed to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris,
And that's precisely right. I just wanted to reiterate that even though we are looking at bylaw changes for outdoor dining, this application before the board tonight can proceed on its own merit under the existing bylaws and doesn't require any of those bylaw changes. I also note, and to that point of concerns that were raised and things that we might want to consider in terms of that, this does also have a number of features that I think address some of the concerns that were raised in that meeting, notably that it is fully enclosed, fenced, and gated. And that was one of the issues that were raised. A lot of the other ones were mainly in relation to vehicular traffic and pedestrians, which is not at issue here. I don't have my full notes from the select board meeting with me tonight, but those are the ones that jump to my mind, and I know that this does have some of those already addressed.
yeah, so if there's any point to be taken from this bit of the conversation is just to be aware of what changes might be coming along and to be cognizant if any of those things seem to have the potential to interact with this, then think about the potential interaction. So far, we're not seeing anything that we could identify now as a potential interaction, but this is just my suggestion is just to sort of make sure we've thought that through.
And
That we don't want to cause more trouble for you guys than we
appreciate it.
and I do want to say just very briefly on this one point that even me saying that thought maybe doing temporary might be worth it, that kind of thing, I am not in favor of holding back a project on the simple merits that we might be changing the bylaw later. That's that's a slippery slope, and I don't want to go down there. That's
yeah, and I don't know, I don't know if there are certain types of permits that are renewed annually or not, or I frankly didn't think we had to come here until Ray brought it up at the end of the meeting, and I said, yeah, you're probably right, and so it's just hard when you got a little business that's only open 3 or 4 days a week, and you have to do the public notices, and then you have to there's actually a lot involved in getting that done.
Right. Anything else, Justin?
Yes. So, one other concern I did have that I share with Matt often when he said it at the August 3rd select board meeting when you first were proposing to put the patio in.
You're gonna have to.
Yeah, I typed on his exact quote just because it's just easier to say it in his words.
Yeah.
In quoting him, my concern is that over time there's potential if you guys move your operations outside, then it becomes not as much during your business hours a community space and more of an outdoor bar situation. Mm-hmm. So that is one concern I have, and to kind of ask a little bit of a question of like 5 questions much mashed together is if during your business hours is anyone, even if you're primarily inside at that time, like if it's winter or whatever, is anyone that is a tenant of One Grafton Common allowed to use the outdoor space?
Yes.
Is, during your non-business hours, is anyone allowed to use outdoor space? Should something happen, whose insurance would something happen on, if someone slipped and fell and like broke their arm, would that be under the town? Would that be under the Townhouse Tavern?
It would actually be either, well, it wouldn't be the town, because we have it would have to be a very serious. I guess a lawyer could do anything, right?
Yeah.
But there's a couple of layers here, right? One is that I manage the building for the town under a long-term lease with an entity called One Grafton Common LLC that's fully insured by the requirements of the lease and town council.
Yes.
And then Grafton Townhouse LLC also has liability insurance, as was directed by town council for any tenant within the building under the lease that we have. So there's kind of at least 2 layers away from the town in terms of liability, but you know, we're required to have.
Probably still has.
I'm sure there's. I'm sure there is some.
My
right.
Yep. My overall
They've got their
concern-
rider on it.
My overall underwriting concern is if we're allowing a business to extend to this patio, does that now mean the whole patio is encompassing part as your business rather than the one rather than all the tenants of One Grafton Common?
Well, so there's this sort of 2 layers, right? So the building in general, right?
Yes.
The building in general has insurance through One Grafton Common LLC, and it's pretty, it's pretty sizable. Whatever, $1 million per this and $5 million per that. It's a bit, it's town council said this is what you got to do, and that's what we bought. With regard to, an event and how that chain rolls out, that's going to be insurance companies and lawyers arguing things if and when something like that were ever to happen. But let me go back to your original sort of preface to that question, which I think was the nub of it. Today, people go in there because we are not required to lock that gate.
Right.
And we don't lock that gate so that tenants can go, and frankly, non-tenants often every day go and eat lunch there and use the picnic tables and all that sort of thing. We're not open at the times when a lot of those people come and do that. We've never ever asked somebody to leave that space, or frankly leave a table from inside where their kids might be coloring while the sister or brother is upstairs and drinking a 99-cent soda for 2 hours. We've never asked anybody to leave for that purpose, and we don't anticipate that ever happening. The change is going to be, and that's slightly complicated, but not really, is that we will be locking that gate when the tavern's open. We're not going to say that you can't go in there. We're not going to tell Apple Tree or Quite Fetching or Beats that they can't go in there. But what we'll have to do, because of the rules around outdoor seating through the ABCC, is that they'll have to come through the main entrance, go out the new door to sit there. So I think that was your first question. Will we still allow people to do that? And the answer is yes.
And
And we've also placed picnic tables on the other side of where we don't have a patio for those people during those times. So it's wide open to anyone, as Sean's saying, unless we're open for alcohol, and then you have to lock that gate and you have to come through, because that's what the rules are. You have to come through the business.
I got to make one correction. I said that we've never not allowed people to come in. We have had a couple of private parties where they were just private parties, but on a regular basis, we don't discourage anybody from coming in.
To ask us, once you do have to start locking that gate, if this was approved, if a parent is in there sitting, eating, drinking, whatever, their kid then comes out of an event, Apple Tree Arts or wherever else it is, could be the library, they come over to are they allowed under the guidelines to enter the premises there?
They are.
Okay.
A tavern, they are allowed, our understanding is that at a tavern, they're allowed to enter the premise with a parent, of course, and all that sort of thing. Not allowed to sit at the bar. And certainly not allowed to order an old fashioned.
With the idea in my head is, are they allowed to enter the premise through the building unaccompanied to then get to their parents?
Well, that doesn't really happen. So what could it have happened? Maybe, but normally what happens is, because there's a couple floors between,
I'm not saying it's happened. I'm not saying it's likely. Just the idea of, I know people that have,
depends how old they are.
Like 10 to 12 years old, kid at the library walking over across the.
Typically at 4 o'clock, from 4 to 6, we have a lot of mothers with children who drop, as Sean said, drop somebody off, and some fathers who come down. Some of them have a drink, some of them don't have a drink. Their kids, if you walk in there between 4 and 6, it looks as much like a daycare as it does a bar. So there's
a lot of popcorn being eaten.
Yes, and not much revenue.
Yeah.
And but that's good, because that's part of the whole thing.
It's
the
community.
parents come
That's
back another
that's the
time,
idea.
and everyone likes it there. But from 4 to 6, I mean, I have to say we've lost some business because people don't like to come into a bar and see kids coloring next to them. But we made a decision that, you know, we'd rather have the community thing and have people there than have, you know, the same 5 people at the bar all the time. So did somebody come from upstairs who's 8 years old downstairs because they've done it 20 times? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a parental thing, whether they let their kid come down on accompanied. A lot of them go up and get them. Some of them, they know when it's over and they cash out and they all leave together.
It's not like little kids running in.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my main question on that was like, should a parent be in there and the kid needs to come down to get the parent? Is there some law that says no, you can't let them in? You know,
Not that we're aware of.
Okay, that's what I wasn't
There's
sure.
6 other kids in there, so yeah, it's fine. For us anyway.
So the rules are slightly different. You know, restaurant, tavern, bar. There's this myriad of rules that pertain to each of those categories.
Yeah.
And in a tavern, underage people are allowed.
Okay.
Through the door.
And then I guess my final point that I can think of is at the February 1st meeting this year, there's one quote I pulled from you that struck me as a little bit odd, and I'm going to read it to you, and then you can explain what you meant. I'm sorry, but...
No, I hope I can remember.
Sure. Quote from you, "We don't use that patio for the tavern very often or very much, and to be honest, we don't intend to." Having heard that at the meeting, I don't see, how what the actual intent of the use is for, how often, for outdoors,
When
even
I
in
say-
good weather.
I guess it depends on how you define often or very much, right?
Yeah.
So, unlike a lot of the other places that have done this, they've put up tents and brought in heaters, and they have outdoor waiting stations, and they have table service, and that's not what we do, right? We have picnic tables. We have a couple of like wicker chairs and stuff. Once in a while, we'll have table service outside, but more often than not, it's somebody's grab something at the bar or through the window, and they sit at a picnic table. By definition, in New England, right? That's a pretty limited amount of time relative to the whole overall, so whenever the weather's bad, we don't have it. We've had a couple of events like a golf outing and, that sort of thing, but, we just have, it's just not
when did he say that?
February 1st.
Of this year? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was, all right.
So, am I understanding correct right now that the intent is that should we grant this and the select board grants your outdoor liquor license, that you'll just have that available to your patrons at any point you're open? Is that the
well, the way
assuming
it works now,
assuming decent weather?
Not assuming decent weather. That's a way to put it. Yeah. I mean, we're not intending to put up a fence,
A bar out there.
a tent or an outdoor serving area, or what I intended to say, and maybe it didn't come out, and however the quote is, but what I intended to say is, look, you guys can go by and look and ask people who frequent the place how often we use it and whether there've been complaints or anything, but we haven't heard any. We think a pretty small fraction of our business comes from outside, but we don't want to lose that because it's fun. And on nice days, people really like to do it. And I hope I didn't say, we don't intend to, have events out there and have somebody playing the guitar, because that's a great thing to do, right? But we're not coming to you because we have this grand plan of all of a sudden turning this into this outdoor carnival-like atmosphere. We just want to keep doing what we've been doing.
No,
and
I'll say, coming to us is contradiction to what I've took out of that was you don't intend to. Well, you're coming to us, so yes, you do. That was the reason why I asked.
Well, yes, not really, because in February when I went, but in February when I went to them, we went to them to ask for permanent use to use the space.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, we don't have a ton of. Read me the quote again if you want. Yeah. But the point wasn't that, whatever we've been doing, we're not going to do that anymore. The point was whatever we've been doing, which is a pretty small part of our business, is what we'd like to continue to do. We're not trying to build a bigger business outside. We don't intend to grow our business and have
Based on
outdoor
outside.
events every night.
Yeah.
That's what I intended. If it didn't come out that way, I apologize.
That's fine. Thank you for the clarity.
Anything else?
Move on.
I see Bob's hand raised.
It's been an hour since I wanted to say, he reminded me to say something. I'm exhausted and I'm going to need a break at the end of this one, but just for a minute. But I'm not going to get any further into the point I was trying to make. I don't think we've quite connected yet about the thing that I'm trying to look at. And we're going to have a conversation that's a little more flowing.
As part of the hearing? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Is that something, Bob, you want to
I'm exhausted.
follow up on during the deliberation on the decision?
Well, just move on. I want him to be able to do it, and it sounds to me like he's going to be able to do it. So we can move on.
All right. Anything else from the board? If not, any member of the public wish to speak on this? I see like several hands here in the room. I think I saw Mr. Whitney's hand up first.
Richard Whitney, 13 Greeny Drive. Gentlemen, I applaud you. You did a wonderful job up there.
Thank you.
I love it. I got my first time to see it the other day when my daughter was bringing me home from the hospital. I stopped and took a look at it because I knew I was going to come here.
Awesome.
They did a wonderful job. The only problem, and Sean, you know this, is I care about the kids that come in and out of Apple Tree. Now, hearing tonight, I was listening to what Justin just asked you, and I understand where that came from. Okay, so that basically, we throw that out the window. Okay, about the parking, I don't see there's a difference of what Bob says at the select board meeting the other night, or if there's a problem with the parking, because as living in the center on Worcester Street for many years, I lived at number 7, my Auntie Rose's, and I'll tell you, parking's always been terrible up there for everything. Even when we were kids and going there for hot lunch meals, okay? So parking, I don't see anything wrong with that at all. The only thing is locking the gate. How are you going to patrol, I call it patrol, okay, or watch your customers not feeding alcohol to somebody else and managing the outside bar? I have not been in your bar, so I don't know if it's that new entrance in and out that you put in is handicapped accessible for wheelchairs and everything else, which I hope it is. I just putting that out there, okay? But the biggest thing is policing your customers on the outside when the children come in, and you said, and I did quote, I'm going to quote you here, that you said it's going to be open.
I gotta watch what I say. I gotta say less. I think I can say
Brooke
less.
would do this too.
Quote me this time.
Brooke would do this too. I'm going to quote you. But it's going to be open to everybody in the building, okay? And I understand your hours, you say start at 4:30.
Right.
Apple Tree gets out what? Or they come in at 4:30 going in and out.
Yeah.
Would it be feasible, now I'm just throwing this out there, that the outdoor area, not taking business away from you, because it looks good, okay, and you did a lot of work, especially with that heater, with the lights hanging off of it, but if you could control your hours outside from like dusk when they're done to your closing. Because that fence is only, what, 4.5 feet? That little plastic fence that goes
Higher
around,
than that, but
Yeah, it's,
you know what I'm saying? And then you're gonna lock the gate,
it's higher than any other business that has outdoor seating.
I
well,
understand.
not
But
higher than the post office pub.
Well, we're not counting that. Approval.
it's been there. But anyways, all kidding aside, my thing is, you've done a wonderful job. I like your attitude about how you going to do. Your biggest hurdle is I think is gonna be getting the license for the outside by ABC. And that'll give you, they'll be a little bit more stringent because there's 2 types of tip certifications that you do know about, that you have to have. One for selling and one for serving now. That's what I was told by my daughter that just went through it. She had to do it. And that was for BJ's, no less.
Well, everyone's tip certified.
Yeah, but no, there's 2 certifications you have to have.
For different types of establishments.
Different types, right. So anyways, but I just want to make sure you're in line. That way there's no holding you back. Go forward. But the children is what I'm after.
No, and you brought that point up last time.
Right, and I did it when I was recuperating the first night after surgery. So,
So you know, 2 things. One is the whole discussion around, and I know, Dave, you said that's a ABC selectman issue, not a planning board issue, but that whole discussion of why we have to lock the gate when we're open but not when we're closed is precisely so we know who's coming through the facility
yeah,
and out and back in and back out. And honestly, there's usually a very small number of people out there. So in terms of policing it, it's not it's never been a factor.
Yeah.
And if there were enough people out there to warrant it, we would have a person out there, and it's complete visibility. You
Well,
can
that's-
stand anywhere on that patio and see almost the whole patio.
okay.
So, you know,
That's my biggest thing.
yeah,
And I think the biggest complaint we'd have if we change the hours are from the people who are going to Apple Tree Arts and because those same
Yeah.
people are going to want to sit outside.
Yeah, because mommy wants to have a little wine.
That's right. Or wait and
that's
eat
exactly
their
right.
lunch outside.
Yeah.
Those people are there. They're the only people who are really there from 4 on are the people who you're worried about, which I'm not saying don't be worried about,
No.
but it's their parents.
No, I understand that, but sometimes, no offense, and I've been through this, parents do indulge and gonna drive a child home or more children. So that's why I'm firm believer of, of the children
They're not
of taking
they're
it.
not there that long.
Well, you never know. They could have come in.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's what I'm worried about. Other than that, I don't see, Mr. Robbins, the parking is anything because the whole center, there's nothing. And you're a walk-in tavern from a hole in the wall, no offense.
Yeah.
But that's it.
no, that's what it is. It's not TGI Fridays.
No, it's not. And the patio is beautiful. I like the fence around it, but just gotta, like I say, lock it at 4:00, 4:30.
And honestly, the reason why I asked Apple Tree and Beats if they'd
Yeah.
be willing to send in a note was based on the comments you had. You said
Yeah.
you're concerned about the kids. I totally understand that.
And that's perfect. That's all I want. I just care about the kids. You guys can.
We care about the kids too.
I know you do.
No one else does, right?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Rich. There was another hand raised up. Thank you. The lady back there.
Hi, Kelly Bernhardt, 68 Weston Street. Thank you all for what you do as a planning board, especially you, Bob Hassinger, and I hope you feel better. Been at it forever. I'm also a former member of the Master Plan Committee going way back. And you guys fit that. To whatever degree your decision is subjective, as a regular since before COVID at the Townhouse Tavern, it's a real community building place. David, you mentioned going to places elsewhere in the world where there's a place where people gather on the sidewalk, and it's all generations, and that's what we love about this place. If we do an after work from home, kind of early night out, we are in that, which we typically do. We're in that transition period from what we call the dance mom period, to, you know, later on when it becomes more of a pub, a bar. Early on, it's more of that community pub. And we do tend to park at that in-between hour, and we've never had a trouble parking. We're typically there at least one night a week. Occasionally, we've had to go up to, you know, the town common to find parking. I do love that kids come through, and they come through at a time where no one is pounding drinks. It's really more a social hour, and they are gone before the place gets busy. And we're there often enough to see that consistently. And as a former child protection worker, I do very much appreciate your concern. It's my concern as well. And I see it as almost like a safe place for kids to be walking by at the time of day that they do, and for parents to be waiting there for other children with younger children. And there's games for them to play inside. And again, it's just very much a place where, you know, we raised our child in this town, and we know every parent of kids his age. But the time we spend at the tavern is time that we really make, you know, other connections in town of all ages. So I do feel like, you know, on a typical day, and the days are typical, that there's that progression of it's not a bad place for kids to observe and be part of at the time that they are. And we've even struck out conversations with people on the other side of the fence as they come and go. And there is another entrance. If I'm a parent who doesn't want my child exposed to someone on the other side of the fence who has beer in their hand, there's another entrance as well, and other parking options. So again, to whatever degree your decision is subjective, all for it on an ongoing basis, not temporary. Okay.
Thank you. And the gentleman there, I should remember your name because you spoke before, but I'm not good at remembering names.
Actually, still the same guy.
Yeah.
Malcolm Reed, 6 Hawthorne Street, North Grafton. I'm a frequent flyer at the tavern. I've been up there Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and like the other gentleman, I also got a bum knee, but I can always find some place to park that's a reasonable hike over to the tavern. I just don't see that parking's a real issue there. So I'm very much in favor of the tavern getting whatever permits they need to operate on that patio. The tavern is a very well managed and staffed and very well cleaned establishment. And I again, 34 years in town now. Did I say 33 last time? The year went by already.
Yeah.
33 years in town.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes. The common area can only benefit, I think, from a place like that. You know, it's not a gin joint. There's not people in there screaming and jumping and fighting and anything like that. It's a very pleasant area. I take my wife there. Sometimes I take my daughter there. And I believe the area can only benefit from that. It's easy to speculate on what if, what might, what happens if this, what happens if that, what happens if the roof collapses on the building. Who knows? You can't make business decisions based on that sort of thing. So I'm very much in favor of the tavern getting the permits that they require.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi, David Barnhart, 68 Weston Street. I won't repeat what my wife said, so you don't have to go through that again, but I agree with everything she said because I'm smart enough to. I just want to say that one of the things that we really like about the tavern is the sense of community, which is one of the points that was raised, and the one point that I don't think had been brought up here, which the outside is really nice for that because it's a quieter environment and you're able to go outside and you're able to have conversations. And because you have picnic tables, you're in an area where you can have conversations with the table right next to you, which might be 21, 22, 23-year-olds and 30-year-olds here. And because Quite Fetching brings the, they have things with dogs. It's also you get a lot of the dog people. And I don't know if any of you people know that, when you have dog people coming, there's a real sense of community there because, my wife can tell you, we have a list of every place that you can bring a dog to, and you find that with a lot of dog people. But that's how you kind of learn and you get to know the people in, your town. And the outside environment is really a great environment. I mean, we're an occasional patron. So we are inside a lot, but but there is something about being outside, and because it's just a very serene environment, and it's not loud. And I can tell you from the child point of view, we're in there usually the first shift. So we're the older group, and then you start seeing the younger people come in, and that's when then we get out of there. But
Dave, you're not the older group.
I'm almost 60, but still, sorry. There's a lot of eyes on those kids. It's that kind of people. So there are a lot of people that are also going to watch other people's kids for them to make sure that there isn't anything going on. And during the summer, when most people are going to be using it, it's still light out. So it's not like it's a dark place. It'd be one thing if it was 6 o'clock and it's dark out there, but it's not. It's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. It's going to be light out there. So there's going to be a lot of visibility. Without going on too long, I just want to say, it's a wonderful place. These guys do a fantastic job, and I heartily encourage the board to do what's best for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I don't see any hands raised on Zoom. Is there anything else from the board? If the board thinks maybe that we've heard all the information we need, that it might be in order to move to close the hearing and direct staff to draft a decision.
I move we close the hearing and direct staff to draft a decision based on all that we have heard and gathered.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll put it to a roll call vote. Justin?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. This hearing is closed. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you.
And staff will work on drafting the paperwork, and the board will take that up at the next meeting.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob, I think you need a break, so we'll take a recess for 5 minutes or so. All the planning board members have rejoined us in the meeting, so we'll time to move out of recess and back into our agenda. And the next agenda item we have is the continuation of the public hearing for a special permit and site plan approval at 244 Worcester Street. So where we left off with this, as I recall the last time, one of the major points was to give the board members a chance to digest the traffic impact analysis and the peer review response to that. Before we get into that specific item, I'd ask the applicant if the applicant has anything new for us to bring us up to date.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Mark Donahue on behalf of the applicant. As we went through the meeting 2 weeks ago, there was really, other than the opportunity for you and the board members to digest and understand the traffic analysis that had been prepared and provided to you together with the MDM response, which both Scott Thornton and Bob Michaud covered in detail with you. There wasn't really any open items that we were left with for homework, so to speak, from my notes. So we're glad Scott is here to answer any further questions that you may have with regard to traffic. And then we're glad to obviously speak to the draft conditions of approval that Mr. McGoldrick has drafted. And we had an opportunity to see and provided some comments today, which you may or may not have the opportunity to see yet. So.
Okay, so I'll make one point before we get into discussion with the board on traffic, and that is that we saw two presentations, two PowerPoints at the last meeting, one on traffic and one on landscaping. I would like to make sure we have copies of those to include in the exhibits And if those are in the office, they haven't been posted to the website. So I want to make sure that those are, they were presented at the meeting, so in that sense, they are already a part of the record, but I think it's important for us to include them as exhibits in the decision, because they both had information that's very relevant to what the board will ultimately decide. And with that, I would open the floor to the board for questions and comments regarding traffic. On my own part, I will say that I went through that, and I had a number of questions about traffic, and I think after studying the traffic report, my own questions were fairly satisfactorily answered. So I'd like to open this up to questions and comments from the board members, specifically on traffic, and then we can move on to other topics as necessary. So, any of the board members have anything to say about traffic? Justin, do you have anything?
Everything that I was concerned about and wondering about was answered when I read the traffic report in full. So I'm good at the moment.
Okay. Prabhu?
I had the open question. I thought we still were going to get some inputs, which was regarding the trucks to the passenger car equivalency. I don't recollect what was exactly said. I know we had the peer review consultant also clarify something, but that I don't remember seeing that on the presentation. I don't have it handy. I don't remember seeing that in the last meeting when it was presented. How many trucks and the trucks being converted, and what was the factor that was being used to convert that into passenger car equivalents? I would appreciate any clarification around that.
Sure. So for the record, Scott Thornton with Vanessa Associates, and the way that the trucks are included in the analysis is that the overall volumes of trucks are incorporated into the percentage of trucks incorporated into the overall vehicular volume, and then that percentage is applied as a quite honestly a heavy vehicle percentage, and a heavy vehicle is represented by any vehicle with more than 4 tires on the pavement. So the micro simulation model that we use makes an adjustment to the saturation flow. And I apologize for getting too much into jargon, but it makes an adjustment to the overall saturation flow for each lane movement, and that so the more trucks that are in a specific lane movement, the lower the saturation flow, which is basically the ideal capacity of that movement, of that lane flow. But as you add trucks into it, it reduces the capacity, which in turn affects delay and queuing and so on. I would say that, given that we are sort of mandating that vehicles would be coming from exit 11, turning right, and turning left into the site, and then returning back to the west to get to exit 11. There's really just a few movements where those truck percentages are affected. And so you can see that in the analysis. The truck percentage, for instance, for the left turn movement westbound at the exit 11 ramps really spikes up quite a bit in the build condition. And similarly, the northbound movement off of the ramps, northbound right turn movement towards the site also increases during the build condition. But those are that and the driveways at the site are really the only movements that see a noticeable change in accordance with the change from for the heavy vehicle percentage. I don't know if that answers your question.
It gives the explanation, but what I was specifically trying to get clarity in the last couple of meetings was Chris, if I may request you, if you can bring up the exhibit number 19. I think, Scott, that's what you had presented first when you talked about the vehicles, traffic and stuff. Exhibit 19, and I think I have it open. Page 3 or slide 3.
Is that the presentation that I had last week or last time?
No, not the last week, the first meeting. It was a 4-slider.
The traffic impact
Can't find it. I can probably
September
find it.
27th.
What's that, Justin?
I was saying that Exhibit 19 is a traffic impact assessment, TIA overview, dated on our record of September 27th, 2021. It was a 4-slide presentation.
Okay. Yep. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, 1 second. I just have to change the permissions. Should be all set.
So this was the one. So my first questions, the first time I was looking for clarity was here, right? When you look at the second column, entering 45, second column, third row, right? Peak hour in the morning, if you pick that as an example. Here there is one truck is considered equal to one car. That's how I read it. 45 plus 4, 49. And that's where I submitted that input. And my days of transportation engineering are 30 years ago, so it's all dated. So I did that finding. You look at this is not the right information. I thought someone was going to go get that corrected, and I don't recollect what was the input of the peer review consultant. But this information is not correct. 45 and 4 are not equal. This is not the total number of equivalent cars, right? The 4 has to be multiplied by some factor, and then it will reflect as 60 or 50 or whatnot is a number. And then we want to see the impact of is it a 3% hike or is it a 5% increase in traffic?
I see. Yeah, you're right. This table is not that. So, and typically what we get, this table represents the on a time period basis, the proportion of the percentage of trucks in the trip generated numbers, or in the trip generation for warehouse uses based on the ITE database. And it's so for instance, we have a total number of trips that are generated using the ITE numbers for warehouse for 375,000 square feet. And the total, just picking the daily time period, is 638. And of those, the ITE database indicates that a percentage of them are trucks. And similarly it has that data for the morning and the evening time period, but it doesn't generate, this table does not show what the equivalent effect of those trucks are on operations or on the travel movements and the operations at the intersections. That's what that heavy vehicle percentage equivalency factor was developed to do, so that the numbers of trucks are added in to the percentage, and that accounts, and then the method or the simulation model or the model accounts for the truck percentages that way. And that's a much more accurate way of addressing the impacts of trucks in the traffic movements and in the intersection operations than to manually adjust the volumes based on a spacing or a physical parameter, because there's not just the size of the vehicle, there's the speed of the vehicle, the turning speed, the startup speed, the slowdown or the deceleration speed. All that has to be taken into account, and the model does that.
Would you mind bringing that up now with this context, whatever you were referring to when you explained the model? How does that show? All I'm trying to understand is, with this facility, is the traffic impact going to be a 3% increase in traffic with all the equivalency factors? Or is it going to be a 5% increase and with all the other things considered? Is the traffic speed going to be reduced by 15% or not? I'm not able to have a very clear picture of what is that we should be looking at in terms of impact of this facility.
It varies. It depends on what parameter you're looking at. If you're looking at delay, then there's one set of values. If you're looking at queuing, that's another set. That's another parameter. If you're looking at percentage volume increases, that's a third. If you're looking at truck increases, that's a fourth. I guess, the way the regulations and the industry standards identify how traffic studies are developed and presented is using a level of service methodology and a capacity analysis model for review of the impacts at intersections under various conditions. And that's what we did in this case, and that's what your peer reviewer reviewed, and didn't really find any issues with that portion of the analysis. There were some, the initial study, I think there were something like 17 comments, and there were 13 that required responses. The last set of which we provided responses to, and then there was another set of comments from the peer review. I think there were 16 comments, 6 of which may require responses, but really the way that the peer review comment letter was written just indicated a number of things to address in the final conditions, in review with Mass DOT, and just incorporated into site plans. So I don't know that and none of those comments really revolved around capacity analysis or the level of service results.
So can I ask this? Let me ask it this way. And there is a reason why I'm trying to understand what is the impact. Then we want to figure out if there is a significant impact. I want to understand how do we address that impact and how do we work together to mitigate that impact. That's the secondary part. But coming back to here, so the 3 points that you mentioned, trip delays, queuing, and volumetrics, right? If I pick on those, if all three, across these three, what would be without the warehouse and what is with the warehouse? Can we have that comparison? So for example, my understanding is without the warehouse, on an average, let's say during the peak period, in that segment, in that road, if we say there is a 15-minute wait time delay, with the warehouse, is it going to be 17 minutes? Is it going to be 25 minutes? That will give one comparison. Likewise, if I see queuing, the way I interpret that is without the warehouse, if on an average during the peak period in that segment of the road, if we have a half a mile queue, with the warehouse, is it going to become a 2-mile queue, right? And likewise on volumes, volume sort of relates to these two. So I guess it doesn't really matter. Is the question fair enough?
Yeah, and I think it's in the reports that have been prepared, just maybe in different locations. So if you look at some of, and I don't have I don't have level of service summary tables ready, but in the report, in the initial report, the no build condition represents the future 2028 condition without the project. It represents any background growth that was identified by the towns of Millbury and Grafton, and the effects of just regular background traffic growth on an annual basis. So, for instance, the looking at the 2028 no build condition, the weekday evening time period. Well, let's look at the weekday morning time period first. So the coming off the overall delay at the intersection of the exit 11 ramps with Worcester Street, overall delay is 15.3 seconds level service B. So that's a weighted average of all the movements. If you want to look specifically at the at let's say a movement that's impacted by the project would be the Route 122 westbound left. That is in the morning time period, that's a 23.1 second delay with a 75-foot average queue. In the build condition, the overall delay increases to a 15.6 seconds, still a B. But then the westbound left delay goes to 25 seconds and the queue goes to 78 feet. So, that's in the initial report. And then, those numbers, we also looked at that intersection and, other intersections as part of the sensitivity analysis, which really looked at a greater than doubling effect of, assuming that the traffic was more than twice what we had initially projected. And in that case, for instance, we're starting off under 2028 no build conditions with an overall delay of 17.5 seconds, which goes to a 21.9 seconds delay under the build condition. And then, if you look at the volumes at the networks, there's traffic flow diagrams for the morning, the evening time periods under no build and build conditions. And you can see that the increase in traffic that's estimated with this project for each movement that we expect to be adding traffic to.
So as I said, so this is helpful, right? 15 to 17 seconds for one of the segments and 75 to 78 feet. So that's the comparison I was looking for. And reading up and remembering 200 pages is not my forte. So that gives a sort of a comfort. The volumes don't really, if it was a 15% increase in volume, but if still the flow of traffic was not that significantly impacted, it doesn't matter much. So I think I have it. I don't know if there is a consolidated view of all this comparisons, pre-bill, post-bill, for the key sections of for the analysis. If not, I'll try to go figure out from the report.
There is a table in the initial report, table 6, that has the traffic volume increase between the no build and the build condition at different locations. So they're mostly on the periphery of the study area. So that in that case, the peak hour traffic volume increases are anywhere between 0.7 and 2%. And that's an overall increase.
Okay. That's on the page 27 or page 16 in the report. Okay.
Yeah, it's table 6 in the initial report. I don't know that we did it for the sensitivity report. I don't think we did.
Overall here, it's up to a 2% increase.
Yeah, I think we just said it for the initial
0.7 to 2%.
report.
Yeah, table 6, I'm looking at that. Okay, I'm good. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Good questions, though.
Anything else, Prabhu?
No, I'm good. Thanks, Dave.
Any other questions from the board at this point?
I have a comment, but it's not related to traffic. I think we take public on traffic, and then I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I guess any member of the public wish to comment specifically on the traffic. Mr. Shannon.
Should we take a vote to extend past 10 before we open to public, just given the length of the agenda? I just want to make sure that before we delve into stuff.
Might as well. I move that we allow the meeting to proceed past 10 p.m.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded that the board continue the meeting past 10 o'clock. Call for a vote.
How about discussion, David? Where?
Yep, any discussion?
We're white.
I'm not so sure.
We might make it, I don't know. It's not ahead.
There may be a chance that we can get this portion of the discussion completed by 10. I think if we see a reasonable prospect for closing the public hearing prior to 10 o'clock, then we could consider going that far in the meeting, closing the hearing, and taking up any essential discussion after that, but otherwise deferring other business to the following meeting.
Merely asking the question, yep. That works.
Yeah. So just as a formality, in case we don't complete the business exactly at 10, we probably should authorize a continuation, but with the understanding that we will basically try to end the meeting at the conclusion of this hearing. With that understanding, any other discussion on the motion? We'll vote on it then. Justin?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabhu?
Aye.
Bob?
Present.
Understood. And Dave votes aye. Motion carried. And we will continue this discussion. Let's try to keep it as brief as we can. I don't want to miss anything, but I don't want to repeat anything that doesn't I just don't want us to repeat things that have already been said in the interest of everybody's time. Mr. Shannon.
Good afternoon. Jim Shannon, 237 Brigham Hill Road. I want to make a quick comment on the traffic report because some things have changed recently with respect to the UPS facility on Route 20 in Shrewsbury. Typically, when they go in and out of that facility, they go west on Route 20 to get to the Mass Pike. With the new development in the old Edgemere facility, they now have 250 individual units over there that they're leasing, which is going to mean somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 cars that are going to be coming in and out of the Edgemere facility, going east and west. So what's happening, I'm told, is that the UPS drivers are now making the decision to go through Grafton to get to the Mass Pike in both directions, both going east and west, if you will. So we're going to see some increased truck traffic from UPS, and I wish I could give you a number, I can't. But all I can tell you is that the traffic report that we have now, in my book, is null and void, really. We're going to see some excess traffic on a regular basis. UPS is open 24/7. Those trucks roll all day. That's my only concern, that we don't have what I would consider an accurate traffic report once again. And this is brand new information that I've had in the last couple of days. Thank you.
Anything else on traffic that hasn't, that's new?
If I might, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Let me just respond to Mr. Shannon's comments from personal knowledge. The so-called Edgemere project in Shrewsbury involves the expenditure by both the state and the developer of more than $10 million of roadway improvements to Route 20 and the Lake Street intersection, including establishing for that entire thoroughfare 4 lanes of traffic, including dedicated turn lanes. So once that work is completed, which is scheduled to be completed in late spring of this year, well ahead, obviously, of our plan, then there'll be that work is already completed or will be done, and will be responsive to any particular concerns that Mr. Shannon refers to from UPS.
And I don't want to dwell on that right now because that the current condition, if anything, is temporary. We need to look at long-term impacts. And if I want to be really picky about it, I would have to say that a larger level of background traffic, which the UPS is theorized here to add to the background traffic, a higher level of background traffic means that the project that we're dealing with now has a lower percentage impact. So let's just keep that in mind, but I don't want to dwell on that. We'll take that information into account as we deliberate on our decision.
Okay. I agree with Mr. Donahue's comments on that, but that does not extend all the way down to the intersection of 122, nor does it extend all the way up to the intersection of 140 on that Edgemere project. So at some point, even though those roads are being widening, and I do agree with that, it's snaking back down to 1 lane.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Amy Thornton, 15 Maplewood. I just have a couple quick things about the traffic. I want to make sure that the town and the traffic study took into account that the Silver Fox facility is on, I don't know if it's in Grafton, but it's on Riverland Street in Millbury. When I was turning out of my road this week, there was buses coming. So I know Deer Gnome was one of those intersections that they talked about maybe having to reconfigure a little bit if this goes through. So I just want to make sure that somebody's paying attention to that. That they're pretty big and they come all day long. 2 questions I have. One, when Prabhu was talking about the numbers that they just went over, is that using the original traffic study or the peer-reviewed one? Because the peer-reviewed one had more than doubled what the original numbers were. So I just want to make sure that Prabhu is getting the most accurate information. The third one is the mandating that the trucks take the Mass Pike. I'd like to know how that's going to be done. Like, I'd like to know how you mandate that, how you monitor it.
I can't say that there is an intention to have some pretty intensive monitoring of traffic, and yes,
like a GPS in the truck, you mean, or something like that.
It's more, on the ground monitoring the actual traffic that results. I think it's probably fair to say that you can't absolutely 100% ironclad guarantee that 100% of the trucks will go one way, but various means, and I'm sure the board will want to address this in a decision should we end up approving the project. Certainly in my mind, the success of this hinges greatly on the vast majority of the truck traffic heading west towards the Pike.
Right.
And so that's, dealing with that is something that I'm sure the board will want to take into account as we draft a decision.
Okay, thank you. And then monitoring that going forward, who does that fall on?
Yeah, the applicant is going to be held responsible for some periodic monitoring, and with the intent of verifying that either the actual traffic that results is within what was predicted, and if it is not, there will be a requirement to
modification,
carry out some additional mitigation.
Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Whitney on traffic.
I know.
And don't repeat anything that's already been said.
Rich Whitney, 13 Greeny Drive, North Grafton. I just want to say one thing. Many years ago, when David and I were on Concom together, wasn't the state going to come in and turn around and from the Mass Pike to 122A by the Dairy Freeze at the time, was going to widen the road to 4 lanes? That's one thing we should look into if the state was still going to do that. Because I remember that very Daly, we sat upstairs and we talked about that and how they were going to do it. That's all I want to say.
Yes, sir.
Six South Street. How are you?
Just on the mandate, is you're very clear that the mandate is that trucks will be exiting west. Does the mandate also include trucks entering from the south 140 through Grafton?
The intent, as I understand it, the plan is, and the traffic analysis is based on all the tractor-trailer traffic coming from the west into the site and leaving the site going to the west.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think euphemistically we say trucks. It's 18-wheelers, and that's what the traffic is, and it is a little bit about the identity of Grafton, what people see when they come into Grafton, when they drive through Grafton, and what they experience, the parents and the kids seeing in Grafton. This is about 18-wheelers in Grafton. Thank you.
Did we get the name of whoever was talking?
Yes. Name and address for the record.
Ed Devaney, 6 South Street.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought I remembered hearing that, but I wasn't sure. All right, I have one hand raised on Zoom. Bill Fairbanks.
Takes a minute to send them over.
They have to accept it. That's the check.
Mr. Fairbanks.
Might not be at their computer.
If
He's
talking,
still on
he's
mute.
There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll repeat, I'm sorry. Mr. Thornton brought this up last time about the Bridge Street area maybe having the lights realigned, which they were already, and they seem to be working out better. But I know for a fact that a lot of traffic on trucks coming from the north, like Maine and New Hampshire, upper parts of Mass, they come down, and to avoid 290, they come down 140. And then they skip over to the Mass Pike instead of taking 495 all the way down. So this is also going to create a much larger bottleneck around the areas of Shrewsbury Street and North Main Street, and in that area. Right now, if you try to get through some of those areas, you can wait for 2 or 3 lights. And if you've ever seen the traffic going by St. Mary's Church, backed up, waiting to get through to come on to North Main Street, it's absurd. So I don't think anybody's ever taken that into consideration. And that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. I see Prabhu's hand is raised here on Zoom. Prabhu?
Going back to Amy's comment, I was actually referring to seeing the initial traffic report, table 6. Scott, can you point me to the revised traffic report and what table? In the initial report, it was 0.7 to 2% increase impact with the post bill. In the revised report, where should I look at it?
Sure. So there wasn't a traffic volume increase table in the revised report, but the level of service and vehicle queue summaries, it's the same number. It just has an R at the end. So it's table 10R. It's on page 6 of 16, and that has the Route 122 and Exit 11 ramp intersections, as well as North Main and Bridge Street and Worcester Street at North Main Street, and then the other unsignalized locations as well. And I just want to point out that the peer reviewer looked at the initial traffic study. So he reviewed the initial traffic study. He also reviewed the updated study. And in terms of changes that would that are proposed at Deer Knoll Street, that's really proposed to address an existing, really to rectify an existing condition that's substandard with pedestrians having to cross a curb cut that's over 100 feet wide. And the idea is to better define that intersection through geometry changes, provide a pedestrian refuge in the middle of the crossing, and really bring it up to ADA standards to make it a benefit for pedestrians using the street.
Dave.
Bob.
Yes. Pet peeve here. Level of service, if I'm not mistaken, is this A through F. Someone decided that from number 1000 to number 1713 is some letter, and then the next increment is some other level. Just the fact that the two results fall within the same letter does not mean that the level of service was not impacted. In the level of service defined with those letters, yes, but if the traffic went up 40% and the letter stayed the same, I'd know about it, and my level of service would have gone up, would have gotten worse. And so I when I hear someone do that, I got a problem with it.
That's understood, and there's other measures, including delays and vehicle queues that again your consultant has reviewed.
And what did he say? Did he say that it's okay and we should approve this application?
Well,
I didn't think that it's our job to take the information that you and he give us and to make a judgment.
That's accurate, but it's also on the issue of traffic. It's indicative for the board's determination on substantial harm that the conclusion reached by Vanessa and Associates was essentially affirmed by your peer review on the empirical traffic study analysis using generally accepted principles. It doesn't usurp your responsibility at all to determine whether the project under the guidelines of section 1.5.5 of the bylaw meets the requirements for a special permit.
Yeah, well, the point is that the traffic's really bad out there and you're going to make it worse. And we're having a whole lot of trouble quantifying that so that mere mortals can handle it.
Well, but with all due respect, the analysis done by the traffic engineers does not find that traffic is bad, nor does it find that this project is going to make it worse.
Well, from personal observation, there's trouble with the traffic out there. We've heard a lot of people say that. The traffic along 122 is bad during the heavy traffic periods. I think Linda saw that when she was up there just a few days ago at one of the establishments there, and there's no question about it. So that's certainly the sense of many people in our town. So that's why we need to look at this carefully and remember what the information that you're giving us is telling us. I really don't think that tonight's presentation helped Linda and I very much because of several factors.
Well, we're glad to try to answer a particular question. This evening's presentation was a follow-up to more than 2 hours of presentation at the last meeting where you did not receive until that day the peer review to give you an opportunity to review it. So we're glad to answer any particular questions with regard to the traffic analysis done by the experts in some fashion. So it's to assist you in making your decision as a board.
Yeah, well, I don't think that they answered the question that we have to answer. I really don't feel too good tonight, though. I don't know whether you saw it, but this isn't the night for me to be drilling down to the bottom of this thing further.
Prabhu, I see your hand up again.
Yes, sir. So, Scott, is there a table 6 equivalent in the new report? I can't find that. And then, Mark, you said that the peer review consultant didn't agreed to no significant, my words, not yours, no significant impact due to this project. I don't care where it is, what is the impact of it. I just want to know if I can see some quantifiable way to see that is it 0 to 0.7 to 2%, that was the original report. Is it the same with the revised report? And if, as Amy had observed, the traffic doubled, then it is, how can it still be only 0.7 to 2%? It should be twice that, 1.4 to 4%. I don't see that in the new report. So if I can get a table 6 equivalent information for the revised report, that will give some comparison. Okay, now this is the revised one, peer-reviewed information. That is something we can put in our head and analyze based on that.
Sure. I can tell you that you're absolutely right. The numbers are not going to be 0.7%. That they probably will be double at some of these locations. As I mentioned before, there was not a revised table 6 in the updated report because the purpose of the updated report was to respond to comments from the peer reviewer, and that was not a comment per se. So I can get you a revised table 6, and it will be laid out the same locations. It will show you the volumes and the percent increases at those locations.
Sounds like that would be helpful, Prabhu?
Yeah. Yes, Dave.
Okay.
Thanks.
So pending receipt of that, an updated table, is there anything else, Prabhu?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else from the board on traffic? It's really, we're approaching the witching hour here, so I'd like to try to wrap this up for tonight. Are there any questions or comments from the board on topics other than traffic?
Yes.
You had something, Justin.
I did. So, for the board's and probably Mark Donahue's knowledge, I did have a member of the public reach out to me to talk about and suggest a landscaping peer review for this project that I had not even considered. After deliberating for myself about it and briefly talking to town staff about what that might look like, just if we did it as a condition or anything like that, my current feeling is that it's not worth doing a peer review as like a fishing expedition. That doesn't seem right to me. And the board and myself didn't have any concerns over what was presented with the landscaping plan. The only slight concern I had would be on the parcel opposite this project where there was a proposal for a sidewalk and how that would look. But that is primarily Mass DOT's jurisdiction for deciding if something's good or not. So at least just to say that yes, I did receive it and yes, I heard about it, I do not think it's necessary. Someone can certainly disagree with me, but I wanted just to say that.
Yeah, I would suggest, and we did discuss this a bit in the context of landscaping last time, that the landscaping proposal that we were presented with was not a very detailed design. The understanding I was left was that the applicant intends to, as the project design moves forward, the applicant intends to produce a more detailed landscaping design, and which would be landscaping related elements, including the sidewalk. Which, the way we normally handle something like this is the board will review that design when it's been completed. The board will review it and with the aim of either approving it or requesting further modifications. I think the board would reserve the right should it prove necessary, to have a peer review to whatever degree is necessary. And it might be, given this, for example, given the sidewalk, it might be a little bit more of a review from an engineering perspective. I wouldn't say we would need to do a peer review, but I would sort of reserve the right to say, if when we get that landscaping plan, if we feel we need some outside peer review of that plan, we want to reserve the right to do that. But not, it wouldn't be a commitment, but it would be sort of as any kind of a revised plan comes in for any peer purpose. If the board needs further peer review of that, we would want to be able to do that. Chris?
I will say, which might be what Chris is going to say, is that in the draft decision that we have in front of us as well, it is identified as, we reserve the right to have a landscaping or an engineering architect review of plan review stuff as our item A8.
Yeah, so the conditions that I drafted in reviewing some of the standard conditions, what I did include in the draft conditions for the board to review, looked at, which is typical to have a landscape plan provided prior to the construction, and prior to the pre-construction meeting where we go over kind of the final steps with the developer and their construction team. I did adjust the standard condition for what we typically do is, peer review engineer for those types of plans. So the board would review, or the board could put it administratively to staff, but I know typically the planning board likes to take a look and approve the final landscape plans, but I did update that peer review to include a landscape architect as well. So the conditions as written do, from my understanding, allow for that if the board finds that necessary.
Yep. I know that in some projects in the past, we have had staff review and approve some landscaping details. So we don't always ask for that to be brought back to the whole board, but we have on occasion delegated that particular review to staff when it seemed appropriate.
Well, if I might, Mr. Hassinger has his hand.
Yes.
Thank you. So I guess I defer to Mr. Hemingway, who might be able to answer, because I thought we had submitted, as to the landscaping on site, so to speak, a fairly detailed plan of both species and everything else. If your reference is to the schematic or conceptual plan we presented 2 weeks ago as to Maplewood and the options there, I don't disagree that was conceptual, and some of that takes some design with regard to some specifics that we're going to have to work out with MassDOT, and I've got no problem with regard to that. But Sam, don't we have a fairly detailed landscaping plan?
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe the landscape architect is also here, made a fairly extensive presentation on that, and can certainly walk through any specifics, again, specific questions or concerns, and walk through how they are addressed. So.
Yeah, that's true. That part, right? You're right. That part of it was pretty detailed, more so than the conceptual on the other side of the street. But,
yeah, I've got no problem with you reserving comment and review of Maplewood, because I think we indicated last time that there may be some sense that it's too dense. Some people may want to have more ability to see through and see the open areas. But so we're glad to talk about that. But I think the site itself is pretty well designed. On the landscaping, it certainly went through the Graves peer review because it was part of the package that went to them. So.
And it's always possible, particularly as time goes on, as you go through your MassDOT review, that and for any number of reasons, plans may change from the time that we. Sure. Again, assuming that we approve this, from that time forward, other factors may come into play that influence the plans, and so there's always, and this is part of the standard conditions that Chris is referring to, is that we most of us know that any changes to the plans come back to the board for review, and either approval as minor modifications, or in some cases major modifications that require a new public hearing process. But we cross those bridges when and if we come to them.
Sure. Okay.
David.
Yes, sir.
There were two things there. Hopefully you didn't go on too long. Hopefully I remember. I think I heard something like that also, what Justin mentioned, that there had been, I think the ZBA had peer reviews of landscaping done, and although the plan that they started with was I guess not bad, that the peer review did help improve it. And the suggestion was that we should be doing the same thing, I guess. The other point was, when we talked about this area last time, I asked about where the state layouts were, and I wanted to see the state layout lines. I don't think I've seen anything to help me with that. The point being that little area there across the street from the site is very strangely laid out, and I cannot determine from the town GIS system anything. It's fairly typical of the rights of way for roads and railroads and so on, that it doesn't, that detail doesn't show up there. It isn't added into the GIS. So I asked for that purpose. One reason being, I'd like to anticipate a little bit about who might actually be the ones who have to do the approving.
That, for general information, this is for the record, this is Sam Hemingway with Garofalo. We did pull up the state highway plat. There's a consistent right of way of 60 feet. So that line runs generally equivalent to the edge of pavement of Maplewood. So the way that plat originally occurred, we pulled the original plat and roadway plat. The two rights of way abut, and the line at which they abut is just about the edge of pavement of the existing road.
Yeah, well, I had asked to be able to see that.
So I'm hearing that there's a couple of things that board members would like to see as part of the record. One is going back to that traffic table, the revised traffic table, and one is the plans that Bob was just referring to.
For clarification, the right of way is in fact on the site plans as well.
It is on the plans. So
Correct.
we have to look carefully to find it.
And I don't think we have an exhibit, this might be an administrative thing, that is the most up-to-date landscaping plan of the site itself. If I'm looking at the list right.
Yeah, I mentioned that at the beginning, that there were these two presentations, one on traffic and one on landscaping, that were presented to us at the previous meeting, but we don't have copies listed on the website as part of the record.
My wires are crossed, I heard presentation, I did not think plan.
Yes, the landscaping was presented to us in the form of a presentation.
Yes.
And
Okay.
at least, it was on the screen. Whether the source document was a PowerPoint or a PDF or whatever, I couldn't tell you. But we saw it on the screen. We want to make sure we have an electronic copy of that as well for inclusion in the record.
Where did you say the line that I'm looking for was shown on that plan?
It's actually, I mean, on site plans themselves, the opposite right of way of the both street lines along the Worcester Street are depicted on the site plans. I'm not sure. I can't speak to although I have the landscape up on my.
Well, the reason I asked was because I looked fairly hard and I didn't find it. Yep. But again, I'm trying to look on a desktop computer, talking to me through the internet at low bandwidth. So
yeah, the landscape plans cut off at the edge on the street side because they were for the property frontage. So that line did not extend to those viewports. They were enlarged plans, but
we'll create an exhibit and submit it separately.
Absolutely.
All right. Is there anything else from the board at this point? Anything from the public, real quick, that addresses something that we haven't already discussed? I see.
Do you want me to stand up again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think the first hand I saw was way in the back.
Sorry.
Actually, my comment is.
Please, you'll have to come up to the mic so that everybody can hear.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sandra Nelson. I live at 13 Maplewood Drive. My comment is a little redundant because I know traffic has been a big source of an issue for certainly our neighborhood and the area in which I live. So I'll make it brief, albeit because of the time, but I do want to say that unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people in Grafton really know about this project at all. And, you know, fortunately and unfortunately, I do. And I think that I think their impression is that there's a storage facility going in there, and they don't understand that there is going to be a tremendous amount of traffic being generated by these trailer trucks. There's been a lot of conversation about how these trailer trucks are going to get on and off the Mass Pike, which I can guarantee that's not going to happen. I live there, and I see trailer trucks coming up and down 122 every day, coming from 140. So I feel sad because I listened to these gentlemen earlier talking about the town, and it's charming and it's serene. People are outdoors eating. I just don't see how a facility like this is compatible for the town of Grafton. It's a lovely town and it's quiet, and I'm concerned about that and what the impact this is going to have, not only on me selfishly, but the town of Grafton.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Thank you.
For your consideration.
Malcolm Reed, Hawthorne Street. Very quick question. I should know this, but I don't. In all of the planning to date, are there traffic lights there? William Street, Durnholm Street. You're looking for, I'm fortunate. I don't have to commute on the Pike anymore. But anybody who's trying to get out there in the morning, you know, you're looking for misery if you don't plan this out very carefully. So are there traffic lights in current planning? Not signs, but traffic lights.
Not that I'm aware of.
No, so, but part of this, and as the conditions are written, we would have, to revise and do, in coordination with Mass DOT, traffic improvements along that road. And so that would be something that would be designed by professional engineers and provided again back to the board for their final approval.
Yeah, I think your question is at least in part with, never mind this particular traffic, but to deal with the traffic that's already there, are there any plans for traffic lights? Is that what you're getting at in part?
Assuming this warehouse, whatever it is, whatever they're going to put in there, if that goes in, will there be more traffic lights to handle this additional trucking traffic? And if we don't know yet, it's okay.
No,
we don't know yet.
That's not known. It's not currently planned. But going back to what I mentioned earlier about subsequent studies of the actual traffic generated by this project, or more generally the traffic as it grows along Route 122, there may at some point in the future it may be determined that some traffic signals are warranted. That's largely under control of the state.
I understood.
So they get to decide. When you put traffic, and we've more than once said we would like to see traffic lights here or there,
Sure.
and the state says no. You don't have enough traffic to make that necessary.
All right.
But again, part of this project is, I think the intent would be for 5 years from the date it's completed, there would be some periodic monitoring of the traffic, which could lead to the installation of traffic signals should the traffic volume warrant it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Dave, remember, the state removed traffic signals from Hollywood Drive.
Yes.
Most of us only remember a blinking yellow light, but that was a downgrade from a more real light.
No,
So
I remember a real traffic light there.
yeah, the state giveth and the state taketh away. That's why I want to know about the state right-of-way lines and all of that. We saw at the high school, at the new high school, that they wouldn't allow a light to be put in. If you recall it, at
I
Brigham Hill.
recall that quite well. That's one of the things I was referring to. Yeah, so as much as those of us locally might see a situation where we would think a traffic signal would really work well, on a state highway in particular, the state is going to say yay or nay, and we have to accept their answer. Anything else? I know it's now slightly past 10 o'clock, and our desire was to wrap this up within not long after 10 o'clock, in the interest of the comfort and safety of some of our, not safety, but comfort of some of our members.
There was one other action item too, as well on the agenda. So.
Yes. So on this particular project, since we have at least one item of information that the board is requesting to be submitted, one of our options is to keep the hearing open for another 2 weeks to accept that, but at the same time, we ought to be able to continue working on drafting a decision and we've done this frequently in the past, in hopes of closing the hearing next time, having received the additional information, and being able to complete our work on the decision that same night. So at this moment, it seems like there is at least a possibility, a fairly strong possibility, of the board being able to finalize a decision in 2 weeks. Whether we keep the hearing open or not, that part of it would work the same way. So we don't really lose anything by keeping the hearing open to receive additional information. And I think I would recommend that as a path forward, particularly given that Bob is running out of gas tonight, understandably, and we don't want to prolong the discussion tonight. But I want to make sure we have maximum opportunity to complete all of our discussion at the next meeting. I would just want to point out, in terms of drafting the decision, particularly with respect to findings that have yet to be drafted, that we've received a lot of information over the course of this hearing process, and the findings in our decision should, to the best of our ability, should reflect our findings based upon all the information that the public has provided to us. So we typically have some of the boilerplate for the 1.5.5x that says we find that this is or not acceptable, but in some cases, at least, we sometimes flesh those out a little bit to refer to information that we've received over the course of the hearing. So that's just sort of some direction as to continuing work on drafting the decision with findings that reflect everything that we've heard throughout the course of the hearing.
And should we keep and should the applicant choose to help us by keeping for the additional information, by keeping the hearing open, we could still accept more public input at the next meeting?
Yes, there is, keeping the hearing open leaves open the possibility of receiving additional information, not just the one piece that we've specifically requested, but anything additional that comes to light. And again, right now we have a drop dead date of April 6th, I think it is, under the expedited permitting. If we are able to complete a decision on March 28th, does the April 6th deadline mean that, I think we talked about this and I don't remember the answer. Does the appeal period have to have expired by April 6th in order to satisfy the requirements?
I don't believe so.
No, does not.
Yeah, but I want to make sure that if we need to bump that April 6th date down the road just a wee bit, then we ought to plan on that. But if it's sufficient for us to issue the decision before April 6th, then I think we're still at a point where we can be comfortable.
My understanding is that it has to be recorded by the town clerk before April 6th.
Yeah, that will happen. I mean, if we can vote on the decision on the 28th of May, yes, it will be recorded by the town clerk the very next day. So, I have one more question from the public.
Amy Thornton again. I don't know all the processes of the town politics, but most of the 109 abutters are against this project. That's obvious. if in the event that it passes, we're requesting to be included in the process of the conditions, if that's possible, which I was told by another board that it is. Specifically, things like, it says in here 24/7, like, I remember the first meeting we talked about, or you had said, Mr. Robbins, that would have to be addressed, that Cumberland Farms can't even stay open that late. So things like that, we would request to be included, at least submitting some mitigation factors if the plan is approved.
Yeah, I would recommend that the best way forward on that is if you have any suggestions for conditions that you think would mitigate the project impacts, best to submit them during the public hearing process. Once the public hearing process closes, the board's continued deliberation, that's where we discuss exactly what we want to put in as
I see what you're
conditions.
saying. Okay.
That's not generally subject to further input from the public. In fact, I mean, be more precise. Once the public hearing is closed, the board is not allowed to accept
anything else.
additional information
Okay.
from the public. So any suggestions that you may have, or anybody, please submit them to the board in the form of comments. I mean, between now and the next hearing, we have a public comment form on the website.
Right.
So you can, and it's best
Okay,
to get
so
those
you're not
in writing
closing it
too.
tonight. That's what I was afraid of. Okay, thank you.
And our draft decision is posted on
I read
our
it.
thing.
Yes, thank you.
So
And so once the decision is written, does the public doesn't get to review that at all?
I mean, you can review it, but
We can't we can't
right, you
comment.
can't.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
And one
Well-
more.
A comment.
Real quick, Leanne Jackman, 17 Maplewood Drive, just so that I understand that clearly. So the next meeting, public comments will be closed.
At the conclusion of the next, for right now, what the hearing is, what we're discussing, we haven't voted on this yet. What we're discussing is keeping the hearing open through next meeting. So next meeting will begin with a continuation of the hearing. So public comments can be accepted at that point up until the board votes to close the public hearing. That basically closes the record.
So in the draft agreement, would the conditions that we want, would that be in there, like the non-24/7, the
So-
landscaping requirements, would that be in that for us to?
So with the direction that I feel that this is going tonight, what I would recommend is that if the board votes to continue the public hearing and the applicant agrees and we go to next meeting, between that 2 weeks, you can communicate with the planning department and we'll be happy to answer any questions that have not been addressed tonight, discuss anything procedural, and we're happy to coordinate on that and help you through the process.
Okay.
And
Thank
yes,
you.
and to elaborate on what Chris said, after discussing with them, if there's a point you want to make for the board on a particular condition you want to see that may not already be in the draft decision, or your reasoning behind it, whatever, you can submit that to us as a board, and we'll be able to see that in our public record.
All right. I think I'd like to say we reached a point where we ought to, assuming the applicant is agreeable, that we ought to vote to continue the public hearing to our next meeting.
That would be our request.
All right, and you will of course follow that up with a request in writing. So I hear a request from the applicant to continue this hearing to March 28th at 7:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll put this to a vote. Justin?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Enthusiastically aye. Linda? Did I hear Linda say aye?
Aye.
And Prabhu?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We will pick this up again in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody, for your patience through all that we've done. And make sure that if you have any suggestions or any additional comments, send them in through the website or come prepared. I'm hopeful that with the discussion will be relatively brief next meeting, so we can focus mainly on completing the decision. But again,
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
And as Chris pointed out, we have one more action item, which that's something we probably need to take up tonight. So this, hopefully this will be brief. A minor modification at 3 Centennial Drive.
Oh, that's what
Show us what that is, and we'll see what we want to do with
If you
it.
guys can bring your conversation.
Yep,
Sorry.
please take the conversation on the hall so we can finish our
Can you
meeting.
please take your conversations out of the room? It picks up on those.
Folks, the conversation can continue in the hall. We have a meeting to continue. All right, so 3 Centennial Drive, Chris.
Thank you. So, Nicole Dunphy is on the call. Thank you for your patience tonight as well.
Thank you.
So, this project is looking for a determination of minor modification to the site, 3 Centennial Drive, which is the IDEX facility. Just trying to pull up the plans quickly here.
I'm sorry, could you please take your conversation out in the hallway?
So Nicole, do you want to run through? I can pull up the plans. Is there a particular?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. For the record, my name is Nicole Dunphy. I'm an associate with High Point Engineering. Here with me is Jeff Shorey from IDEX. I'll keep the presentation brief. We're here to request a minor modification. That's an old plan. A minor modification to the site plan approval for the IDEX project located at 3 Centennial Drive. We were before you back in October for a modification to the site plan approval to allow the construction of a 480 square foot accessory building for biomedical waste. Part of that project had a dumpster pad in the upper parking lot. As we're going through constructions, we learned that the needs of the dumpster pad don't meet the requirements of IDEX. So we're proposing to install a concrete pad off the lower parking lot on the east side of the building for a trash compactor. The pad will be 10 feet by 35 feet. We submitted a plan that kind of shows what the proposal entails, and I'll briefly explain it. We're proposing to reconfigure an existing landscape island in the lower parking lot. There we go. The top of the page is the parking lot we're talking about. Relocate
Is this a new?
No, it's a
3 existing parking spaces, 2 of which are handicap accessible, from this side of the property, from the plan left side of the property to the right side adjacent to the reconfigured landscape island. We're proposing to reuse an existing concrete ramp in the east corner of the parking lot, proposing to install concrete pavers to keep the impervious cover down, which will lead to the trash compactor pad. The trash compactor will be fitted in between the building and the new sidewalk that was approved during our last presentation to you back in October. And we're talking about an increase based on the size of the concrete pad and the reduction of the landscape island of about 440 square feet of impervious area total. We did present to you last time a stormwater report to show that the existing drainage system was more than adequately sized to accept runoff from the improvements of the property, and that was reviewed by Graves Engineering, your peer review engineer. So this area will, go with that same design and, have minimal impact on the overall design. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board? Justin?
So just to ask it, the truck that would be presumably taking out the refuse from this compactor, it would come in over the existing parking lot with the new pavement that you're doing this little lip there, and then over the grass pavers and directly along the side of the building where there's not really that much overall clearance between like, the new generator pad and that stuff. Is that how I'm understanding this correctly?
Yeah, there is a guardrail that will be placed between the building and the grass pavers as well as the concrete pad itself. So there will be protection for the building. The grass ramp, the concrete ramp that you see is not new. That does exist today. And we're not increasing any impervious area in this way. We're just reconfiguring the parking spaces and then reducing the island to allow a 33-foot wide path for the truck to access the compactor.
And looking at this, have you done any investigation on turning radius to see if it encroaches on those parking spots that are shown right there, the handicap spots?
Yes, we have done turning studies.
Okay. My only concerns.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Any comments? Hearing none.
I move that we find this as a minor modification and direct staff to make appropriate documentation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. And thank you for your patience in sitting through all the rest.
Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good
And
night.
I think in terms of other essential business that we have to carry out tonight, we do have some bills to be approved.
I move. I'll second Bob's motion to approve the bills.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Justin.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
All right. And is there anything by way of staff report that you need to bring to our attention tonight, Chris?
All I would ask is that there were materials that were included. If you could just take a look at them before next meeting, and they will be moved to discussion items for that
And
meeting.
my only question for you, Chris, what is our deadline on the board coming to a consensus on the proposed zoning articles for spring? Is that coming up really tight?
Oh.
Yes. It will be tight, but we will. I'll try to make a very succinct presentation and hopefully have some language put together.
Yeah, and if time proves to be too tight, the fall is always an option.
Yes.
So I think none of these proposed zoning articles are really that time critical that we have to get them done in the spring.
Right.
So let's see what we can do. But if we can't make the timeline for spring, we will have plenty of time to get them in for the fall. Okay. Anything else anybody wants to really wants to bring up tonight? There's a lot of things I'd like to talk about, but I'm happy to wait till the next meeting.
I want to make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. The motion is not debatable. Justin.
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
Linda.
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. This meeting is adjourned.